Welcome to episode 37 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to Michael Pennell of Python and a Pear Tree. And you're obviously you've been making the rounds talking about your dwarf Burmese, but you keep quite a few other things, right? What are some other species that you keep?
Well, I guess I was originally known for carpet pythons, specifically coastal carpet pythons. So I keep a lot of different Morelia species. I'm working with Antaresia. I got 3. I don't quite have the whole shebang of 4 yet, but children's, spotteds, and Stimsons. Of course, like most people, work with ball pythons as well. I have some Angolans. Some red bloods right now, Savu pythons. Let me see, a couple of different colubrids. Bred Japanese rat snakes in the past. I've got Russians right now, Western hognose, American black rats, Kenyan sand boas. Saharan sand boas. And
You have house snakes too, right?
I did. I kind of moved those on.
Oh, you did?
But I was working with them for a little while.
Yeah.
The one I'm interested in now is the Pakistan jeweled rat snake.
Okay.
I've got a pair of those, and I'm working to try to acquire another pair in the near future.
That sounds pretty wild.
It's a really cool snake. Like, I used to have one probably 16, 20 years ago, and I could never find a mate for it. So I finally sold it. And like everything else that's kind of was lost to the hobby and came back, the price has gone through the roof on them now.
Sure.
But it was like less than $100 back then. But essentially, it kind of looks like a corn snake, the pattern and stuff, but different. And then as it grows, it looks like you took black tar and just threw it at the snake in just different spots, head, body. It goes through an autogenetic color change. And then it starts getting these dark spots that develop darker and darker. And so the end result looks like you just threw black paint, tar all over it.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's definitely a different snake to have.
What when did you get into ball pythons? Was that sort of at the beginning? Is that one of the first things you got into? Is that like your bread and butter?
Well, I got into it. Let me see. So I was working with a young man that got me into snakes. I kind of always, my grandparents had a farm growing up when I was living in Kansas, and the typical snake is a dead snake. So,
yeah,
I grew up watching them. I do remember one time when my grandfather had killed some snakes, chunked them across the highway. Found out later on they were king snakes. Didn't know much. I was really, really young then, which kind of threw them all off when I wound up getting into snakes later in life. But, kind of had a love for animals and different stuff. And it was probably about 1920. And met a young man I work with. They had a couple snakes, and I think he had an iguana. And I went over to his house and started messing with the snakes. And of course, he had a ball python. And we wound up finding a guy, and I bought my first snake was a ball python, and I got it from a jobber, which is basically somebody was getting the wild caught stuff in, moving it to pet stores or whatever. And I think I had it like 3 days, and it died. Which for most people are like, okay, I'm out. I'm not getting into this. I'm done. And still the interest was there. So I wound up going back to him, and he didn't have any ball pythons in, but he had a albino California king snake. So I got that. Meanest little crap I'd ever had. Kept it for a couple years, and then I don't remember what made me get into a couple more. I think the reptile shows really kind of started popping up down here in the South. So this was late 90s.
Yeah.
And started going to a couple reptile shows, and or him and I did. And then started kind of collecting a few more and different stuff. And then years later, it was like, you start looking at breeding and kind of going that aspect, and then it just kind of flourished after that. So, I've kept ball python for started keeping probably 30 years ago.
Wow. Dang. That's wild. They're an important part of the hobby. That's for sure. They're a staple. I've got a pair, and I kind of thought, should I have them? It's if I breed them, am I going to be able to sell the babies and things like that? But it's would you consider that like a good species to start with for breeding?
Coming from a carpet side, and a lot of carpet guys will say stick with carpets. Breeding, I think you could go by with just about anything, carpet wise, ball python, different corn snakes. I know for a long time, just when you're looking for somebody for like young kids, first beginner snake was normally a ball python or a corn snake, just because they were less prone to bite. You get too many that get a little nippy carpet python or something. It bites them, it scares them, and they're kind of turned off. So being able to hold a ball python just in your lap and watch TV, you kind of bond with it. If you decide to advance further into different species, carpets, savus, whatever, you get bit, you understand, one, you're a little older. Two, you understand snakes have basic, desires and needs, and they're not dogs and cats. So, I've always liked the ball python for that aspect. I think every species has, cons and pros and cons. And one of the cons with ball pythons is sometimes they can go off feet, which can be, really bothersome when you're on set, especially trying to breed, and then they just go off feed for like 9 months for no apparent reason. Carpet pythons, typically they eat. You don't have a problem with them. If they quit eating, normally it's because there's a problem. So, I will say that, I think you brought up before, ball pythons are great. They have been a great asset to the hobby. Honestly, if it wasn't for them and the morphs, I don't know if the hobby would be as advanced as it is, as far as bringing in more and more people, and along with, people like Brian Barczyk with the different YouTubes and podcasts, and just engaging more regular people that didn't really have the knowledge or interest in snakes, but then it's kind of piqued some interest. So I think all of that has had its place. Having said that, ball pythons are kind of harder to sell nowadays, just because there's such a flood of everybody's trying to get that next big thing. So, I'm seeing it a lot just in, internet sales, show sales. Used to be, I've always had some carpet pythons and stuff, but the ball pythons will kind of cover your table, get you a little change in your pocket. And now they're just still sitting on the table. And it's somewhat harder to move. And then you talk to guys that have been in hobby longer than me, and they're like, man, I remember when you couldn't even give these things away. This was really before there were any morphs. And they're like, you couldn't even give ball pythons away. And then it just went to where they were one of the most expensive snakes, period. And then now you're kind of going back to the same aspect. It's harder to move them. I think there's still market there. I just think it's harder to move.
Yeah. Do you think that when you're moving them at a reptile show, is it mostly to people that are buying pets, or is it to other breeders that are looking for specific morphs for a new combination?
I would say it's a combination of both. A lot of times, beginner keepers, they're looking at ease of maintenance, less chance of bite. And so typically it's a ball python moved that way. Some of my, kind of higher end morphs, those are moved to either other breeders, other vendors, or somebody that's looking for a specific gene or combination. And sometimes you just get the random person that just likes the look of a snake, and it can be a $500 ball python, and they just buy it, period, as just a pet because they just like the look.
Yeah.
But typically, younger families bringing kids in that's had the interest, watched, all the little videos. I think now the one I hear about more is snake discovery. Everybody's watching Emily with snake discovery. So, everybody comes in, well, we've seen this snake on here, and so it kind of piqued an interest, and then they want to feed the child's interest. So then they wind up getting a snake. And a lot of times it is a ball python. Sometimes it's a hog nose. But I would say probably most of the time it's a ball python.
Yeah. What do you think like the price cap is for somebody that's looking for a pet ball python? Is it usually like around a certain dollar mark that you've noticed?
I would say anywhere from $0 to about $200. Normally, if they're younger kids, they probably start, what I've seen is they want to get like a normal or a pastel, maybe something a little different like a Mojave butter, kind of a base gene. And I don't know if it's kind of the aspect that, hey, if the kid doesn't take care of this snake and it dies, I'm not out a whole lot of money. Because in essence, you're spending more on the setup than you are the animal.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
By the time you get the cage and you get the bedding, and with ball pythons, you really need 2 hides if they're doing aquariums, because if they're just doing the one pet, they're not buying rack systems or, an expensive cage with sliding glass or something like that. So they're getting an aquarium in like a basic setup. And, that's probably 3-4 times more than the snake is. Whereas before you were buying the animal and it wound up being one of your most expensive initial purchase. Then you have your setup, but then long-term is the feed for it is what becomes, a longer, higher purchase than the initial snake itself.
What do you recommend? Or like, are you, when you have like a customer that's coming to you at a table and they're looking to get their first pet snake or their ball python or something, like how are you recommending that they set that animal up?
For a ball python, I kind of talk with them as far as what kind of cage setup they're trying to get, whether it's an aquarium. I point them out to, a lot of times I do shows with recoil reptiles, and they have some really nice cages and racks. And, what kind of setup are you trying to get? If they're trying to do an aquarium, you want to get 2 hides, one for hot side, one for cool side, heat pad under the hot side, water bowl. And I like to use Reptile as a bedding. You can use Aspen, works really, really well, but they need a little bit higher humidity, so Reptile works really well. I try to discourage the hot lamp light bulb that everybody likes to do, or like when I getting in the hobby ages ago, that's kind of how the setup was. You had a lamp on top, but everybody turns the lamp off at night, and I said your snake has no heat at night, so you can have a light, but you need to make sure you have that secondary heat source. But basically just having the 2 hides and a water bowl as a basic setup. I said you can put some branches and stuff in there, but just basic setup, the bedding, water bowl, and 2 hides. And I said, be honest, they're not a display snake. They're going to hide all day.
Yeah.
So if you want a display snake, that's these different colubrids I have. That's the carpet python. That's these other snakes that will display during the day and not just stay hidden all day. But I said you got to understand where they come from in their native habitat. That's kind of what they do, and they come out at night. So you have to. We can't just take an animal and put it in and expect it to be something that it's not. Ball pythons hide during the day. They're a great snake, and you can most of the time just reach in the cage, pull them straight on out, whatever it is, day, night, whatever. But you need to understand, as a display animal, they're not going to do it because they come out at night. So as long as you're okay with that, they make a great snake. But if you want some display, that's when you step up to, carpets. And then I go into, hey, these can be a little nippy, but as you work with them, they get some size, they become more less prone to bite just because they get some size. They don't have as much fear and timidness in them that they start to become really great captives, and they display well. So you kind of work them, into it like that.
And what are you recommending that they use for a heat source?
Do it.
What are you recommending they use for a heat source?
I normally use heat pad.
Okay.
So anything like Zoomed, Zilla. I'm trying to think of the other brand. UTH.
Okay.
I think they have a brand that's UTH, and I mean it stands for under tank heater, but
sure.
Just basically one of those, and then always tied into a rheostat so that you can monitor the temperature.
So what do you recommend for a temperature for a ball python when you have them all set up like that with the under tank heat?
Try to shoot for 88 to 90 degrees on the hot side.
Okay.
And, as far as ambient, it, basically whatever the house is, or, room that you keep it in.
Okay. Now, with your carpets and the way you keep your carpets, I know that you had mentioned losing the heat at night and that being problematic. Or do you do the same thing with your carpets? Do you give them heat 24/7?
Well, yeah. I do a night temp drop.
Okay.
On mine, and most of them either in cages or in rack systems.
Okay.
And so I want to say I do about 88 to 90-ish, just depending on the setup, whether it's a bigger cage or not, and do a night temp drop to probably 82, 84.
Okay.
And it normally a bigger cage, you do find that they don't spend as much time under the hot side unless they're digesting a meal, and then they kind of move around a little bit. I think Nick mentioned liking about that 82 to 84 degree range, which works really great. I just like to give them a little bit higher heat. It helps them metabolize the food. As far as I've seen, metabolize the food a little bit better. Summer, I have to, because it can get really hot down here in Texas at times when we have a really hot summer, I have to alter the temp, or the cage can get kind of above that. Even the cool side is, because it's hard to keep that room kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being in Florida, I kind of go through the same thing. I do use, I'm actually switching over from heat emitters to basking bulbs. And I was surprised at how low of a wattage I actually need. For that, I was thinking that, I'm going to need this, like a 50 watt bulb for a big 4x2. Right. And then I ended up settling at a 25 watt bulb, is basically perfect to have that on full blast. And it gives me like a 88 degree hot spot. But if it's a really hot day here in Florida, it'll definitely go up to, maybe 90, 92. And but that's at the peak. And then it'll kind of drop from there. So yeah, I definitely, I get what you're saying about the crazy temperatures being in Florida.
Yeah.
So you're just dialing in your herpstat or your rheostat or whatever you're using, and then just kind of letting it ride the ambient?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So even like right now, we've been having some, I think it's actually supposed to get up to almost 70 today, but we've been getting down into the 30s. So room's been probably low 70s as an ambient right now. And, hot spot, because basically everything's going into breeding season. So I think most of my hot spots are sitting at about 82, 80 to 82, depending on what cage setup and species in it.
Okay. Which ones have the most radical temperature drop, and then which ones have like the least radical?
Most radical would be your colubrids,
Okay.
hognose, rat snakes, North American stuff. I actually have another room. I'm working on getting set it up with another mini split so I can monitor it a little bit better. But it's got some insulation and one wall that's not. So I can kind of get 50s. So when it's about 30 degrees outside, I'm getting into probably about 55 in that room.
Damn.
So I can, if it gets to where them warmer days, I'll probably open the window a little bit and try to keep it a little bit cooler. But it works great for the colubrids because you got to think, Florida, here in Texas, a nice warm day, they're going to get out and bask. They're not looking for food, but they're going to get up and bask, and they're going to go back and hide. So a couple of warm days and stuff in there is not a problem. And that's with most snakes. I mean, I'm having to take my I would say temperate pythons, but they're really not. The Brisbanes, your Brettles, your inlands, and I kind of set them up in smaller tubs, and I take them into that room in the evening and then bring them back to my snake room and kind of leave them on the floor during the day. So they're getting about a 50 to 55, 60 at night, and then a 70 to 75 during the day, which tries to mirror where they're from in their native habitat, that it does get warm. So they don't just kind of hibernate for the whole winter. They have them warm days. And, so I do that for about 2.5 months, and then kind of set them back up in their cage, and it seemed to work. So
what do you, do you have any diamonds or Brettles or anything?
I did have some Brettles for a little while, kind of move those on, may get some again. Diamonds,
They need to get real cold, right? The Brettles?
You want to get about down to 55 or so.
Wow.
And diamonds, once I get that other room set up, I'm gonna kind of make it more of like a colubrid room, and I'll probably set up some diamonds in it because I can keep that room cooler, and in that winter cool is perfect. So once I can kind of get that set up, I've seen what was it? Terry Burwell did when he built his building. He did 2 separate rooms with the 2 mini splits, and he has one basically for his diamonds and stuff that can keep it really cool. And then you just open the door and you're in the other room, and that's kind of where I'm trying to do on my setup as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I plan on keeping diamonds outside. And, if I get a building, if I get a building, I'll keep the diamonds out, and if I ever get Brettles, it'll be the same thing, keep some stuff outside, and I'm really excited about trying it out. I'm still kind of up in the air if I should provide supplemental heat or just give them a really good place to get away, get out of any drafts, like a really well insulated thing that they can get into. Yeah,
I mean, I think it would work. If I remember correctly, the Barkers, when they set up their place in Bernie, used to have kind of indoor, outdoor for their retics. And so they were basically outside most of the year. But then when it would get cool, they had like a kind of like a, what do they call it? Like a dog run where you have an indoor, outdoor. But the way I was understanding, the retics just want to stay outside with the cold. You had to coax them in. Otherwise, they just stay out there and freeze. It's like they didn't know, let's get away into here, into a warmer area. You had to kind of coax them in and then kind of close the door. I've got some friends that have, they do tortoises that way. Tortoises, they don't really have to coax as much, but it gets cool. They kind of drop the door down. They stay in there. They have some heat for the really, extensive days that get too cold. And then warmer days, they can open it up, let them get some fresh sunshine, crisp air, and then, right back in.
Yeah. Do you keep any tortoises or anything?
Not right now. I used to keep some leopard tortoises, redfoot, a couple of box turtles, some Russians, and I did have care of a radiated tortoise for a little while until I had to move and let that gentleman have it back. But I would really love to get back into them. I really enjoyed having them. And I think, where you're at in Florida, Texas, I think a really great environment for us to set up. You just have to watch which species due to humidity issues.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff I would like to keep, maybe not humid enough.
Mm.
And then there's species that need less humidity that you wouldn't be able to keep. So you just got to kind of find a balance, what kind of works where you're at. And, you know, if not, you kind of find some ways to supplement it. So
What do your temperatures get down to in the winter where you're at in Texas?
So I'm in Tyler, Texas, which is basically halfway between Dallas, Texas, and Shreveport, Louisiana, along I-20. So
Okay.
northeast. We can get, I think the coldest I seen was about 0. When we had Snowmageddon, there was a day it got down to 0.
Damn.
It doesn't typically get that cold. I would say maybe 20s.
Okay.
A couple of times. I mean, we don't have real hard freezes. You might have spells of like 3 days where there's a hard freeze, so it's below 32. But after that, it kind of warms up. And so you have, you know, you don't have that hard freeze for long. Like in Kansas, it would go for a while. 0 was nothing in certain areas. So down here, yeah, I'd say about low 20s. And typically it's more so in late January, February, going into March. So it kind of throws where I've always kind of typically said when I'm cooling the snakes or, you know, cooling the pythons or doing my colubrids, you drop them, you know, you give them their last meal, you give them 2 weeks to empty out, and then you start, you know, cooling them down. So like Thanksgiving to Super Bowl. So that kind of gives everybody, instead of saying exact dates, you kind of know, hey, this, you know, holidays, it's easier to kind of clue into it. But I can bring them out, Super Bowl being in late January, and we can get bad weather in February. We've had ice in March. So then you're kind of warming them up, you're getting stuff in the breed, and you have ice and the electricity goes out. So, you know, it's, you kind of just have to roll with it. But if I wait too long, then my season runs extremely late, you know, where you're hatching stuff out in like December that should have been maybe in the summer. If I tried to alter it too much to do that.
What about the short tails? What are you keeping? You said that you're keeping red bloods?
Yes.
What, how long have you been messing around with short tails? Is this like a recent endeavor, or have you had them for a while?
I had Borneo short tails and red bloods back in the late 90s, going into 2000s. Bred short tail Borneos for 2 years. Never got the reds to breed at that time. And then I went through a life change, got divorced, had to sell a bunch of stuff off, and I moved those out. I kept my carpet, some of the balls, different stuff. It was stuff that I was a little bit more attached to at the time. Mm-hmm. So I recently got back into the bloods probably 3 years ago. So I only have a pair right now. It's Batik or Batrix male and a T-Nig albino matrix female.
Nice. So
like to get into them a little bit more. Just finding room. It's you know, I've always got more carpets. I have a lot of holdbacks, and so you got to make room for all those. And you know, but you can't have a room full of that because then you don't have a mix of stuff. So you got to try to find a balance in there somewhere.
Yeah. What is it that draws you to the short tails? So, you know, I know that you have so many carpets and you're online and all that. So they're such a polar opposite animal, you know?
Yeah. I would say it became more of, I fell in love with Borneos, like I said, probably in 99, I think is when I got mine. It was the kind of we call it a sausage snake. So Burmese width, you know, girth, ball python length. Until you get red bloods, it's a little different. But, you know, when you started seeing more and more regulations coming out, when it was restricting large constrictors, burms, retics, you know, stuff like that. So a lot of people like that look. So if you had a snake that still could, maintain guidelines under 8 feet. Didn't say nothing about girth. You could, carpets typically, boom, large snake, but manageable. Bloods, larger snake, but manageable. So you still open a door to have a variety of different snakes that still fell under guidelines depending on where you lived. But, you had that connection to the larger one and it was still manageable versus stuff I can't keep. And now I'm just going to have to completely get out or have, colubrids snakes or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I've always kind of liked to look, seen some of the morph combos on a few of them. I really like, I had black bloods before too. Well, actually I had one female and they're interesting. Mine was a little Satan spawn though. So
The Sumatrans.
Yeah. The Sumatran. Yeah. Black. She was dark, gorgeous. Wish I'd never got rid of her, but.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. You see some of them that are just pitch black with like orange, red eyes. It's bananas. They're so wild looking.
And then you see so many that are Sumatrans. They look like really dark Borneos. And I'm like, no, they're supposed to be more of this black look. And she was, like you said, the orange eyes, black, and you kind of had white, like a gray white outline of her pattern. She was really dark. She was just mean. And it was one I got way, 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 way back. So this is before I kind of knew much on really kind of how to handle them a little different. And I just wish I had never got rid of her. She was gorgeous. I hadn't really seen another one that dark.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Elijah has some really wild looking ones that just, so black, and the eyes are just really incredible looking.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you choose the bloods when you were getting back into short tails? What made you go that route?
Well, the Batrix male, friend of mine that did retics and some different stuff had a couple of reds, and he got some snakes from me, and so I kind of got that Batrix male in a trade.
Nice.
And went to a show, and I think it was a benefit auction for somebody. I can't remember now. And that's how I acquired the T-Neg albino female. So I was like, well, it's time for me to go ahead and get back into them now that I'm starting to, kind of get situated, have a little bit more space. And I just like, reptiles in general. So I don't really have, hey, carpet pythons are the best. These are the only snakes to have. Ball pythons are the best. I like just reptiles. I've kept, different geckos, different lizards, bearded dragons, pictus geckos, aquatic turtles. Actually have a small group of, I believe they're all 3 females, but blue tongue skinks.
Oh, nice.
Was like, nah, I just wanted to stick with snakes, but, I had a friend send me these blue tongues to a show to try to sell for them. They didn't sell. And he's like, why don't you just keep them for a little while? And he kind of started growing on me. And it's like, great, another project. So, it is what it is. And I've got a buddy, Paul Mobile, that I do shows with a lot down here. And he kind of branched and started doing cave geckos. So it was kind of seeing this whole love for just not snakes anymore, because a lot of them were starting to get played out. You had, bearded dragons and leopard geckos, which are great, but you were starting to see them on every table. I love crested geckos. And just knowing they started with such a small handful of animals to kind of blow up where they're at now, and you start getting these different morphs and stuff, and it was, I need something that I can mess with. And I started getting that blue tongue, and it sat on my shoulder, and it was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So, and then, I see Corey Martin at shows all the time. I'm actually repping her shirt today. She's kind of moved through different species from carpets to balls to whatever. And now she's doing monitors, doing a lot of tree monitors and stuff in that. So seeing that whole fascination and be like, yeah, I really, really like those, but I need me to have time and then food source, because it's not mice and rats. You've got to have some, some dubia, some different stuff. So with anybody, you start finding out it's cheaper to raise your own food than buy it.
Yeah.
But it becomes a whole other chore. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I recently got into keeping rabbits, and luckily I've been able to outsource a lot of that work to my oldest son. So
That's good. That's good. What breed?
they are Texas A&M.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're like a very heat tolerant meat rabbit. So they grow fast. They're very soft. Their fur is incredible, and
Mm-hmm.
just very laid back too. So they're just a really good all around rabbit, and they can take the Florida heat, and then they love the cold too. So they're
Oh,
actually
nice.
they're actually starting to breed now that it cooled off, and
Mm-hmm.
so we'll see here. Hopefully, I'll have some Argentine boa food coming down the pipeline
Man,
here.
that'll work. Yeah, I tried breeding rabbits um, many years ago, and the heat it kills them, man. If you're not on top of it, and you're working 10 hours a day or whatever, it's hard to try to take care of. So, and then recently at shows, I've been seeing a guy that had some Flemish giants.
Hmm.
I mean, if you can get into those and you start doing bigger snakes, you're talking about a 35-pound rabbit,
Yeah, it's insane.
full grown. And I'm seeing these like those are 4 months old. Like 4 months is like the size of like the New Zealand, California, even those ones you're talking about,
Yeah.
almost adult size. And these are like 4 months. I'm like, wow,
Yeah,
those are
it's
crazy.
bananas. It's
Mm-hmm.
bananas. I think I read something like a pair of rabbits can produce like 150 pounds of meat per year, which
Mm-hmm.
is just it's wild how fast. I think they gestate for 4 weeks, and they have them weaned in I can't remember, like 4 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's wild how fast it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm hoping that these ones do well during the summer, and once the temperatures start picking up again.
Oh
But,
yeah.
but yeah, the same thing. It's funny you said that about the restrictions and all that, and I can't have berms or retics or any of the really
Mm-hmm.
large snakes here in Florida, and that's one of the things that really drew me to the short-tail pythons is just that sort of big snake look and feel that you get from the bloods,
Yeah.
but in a smaller, more compact package.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm working on getting a pair of them right now and getting them set up. How do you keep yours temperature wise? What are you keeping them at?
I honestly think people complicate stuff too much. And, this species has to have this temperature and this. Honestly, I kind of keep everything about the same.
Okay.
So they're offered a hot spot of 88 to 90. Sometimes, like I said, when they digest food, they use it. Most of the time, they're probably on the cooler side of the cage. If I started getting more, and I would have kind of a system, like a freedom breeder rack system or something like that I might dial their heat down a little bit less, just because I don't think they need as high heat
Yeah.
as a lot of the other species that I have do. Um, and their metabolism's a little bit slower, so they can sit motionless for like days at a time and just do nothing. So they're not burning as many calories. So you don't really need the high heat because of it either cause them to get constipated because they already go for a long time without going to the restroom anyway. So then too much high heat pulls out some humidity, can
Yeah.
cause them to get constipated. So you got to kind of monitor that a little bit and kind of keep their cage a little more humid. Um, but I mean, I like them. Just went to a show in Kansas this last weekend, and Chris from Python Palace was there, and he had a bunch of different Borneos and a couple of reds, and it was like, wow, that was really, really nice. And then he had a pair of Indian pythons too, and I really like those. But yeah, those are CITES restricted, so
So you can't keep those where you're at?
no, it's one of those that, and I don't remember if it's CITES one, but it's some of that stuff that's restricted across state lines. So I think that's
Yeah.
CITES one.
No interstate travel
So I
or
would
whatever.
be able to keep them, and he talked about gifting them to me.
Hmm.
So I talked with Russ Gurley. There's a way when a lot of tortoises and stuff, you can get gifts. And matter of fact, Eric Chacon gifted me a Puerto Rican boa.
Oh, nice.
And it turns out I've got a male, so I need to find a female. And then you would be able to sell, to people in your state because they're already in your state, but you cannot, there can be no monetary, a sales type of transaction anywhere. If it's a gift, you can get them that way, but you can't do any kind of monetary transactions or anything like that. So I didn't have cage space and stuff at the time. And I was like, I sure did like them though. They were different.
Yeah. What about the Sri Lankans? Do you like those too?
Yeah. They were kind of neat.
They're similar to the Indians, right? Just a little smaller.
I think they're a little smaller and a little bit different color. I mean, they all, because they're still all subspecies of the Burmese python, if I'm not mistaken, but smaller. And I think, honestly, that's kind of what drew me to the dwarf Burmese was I'm not really a large snake guy.
Yeah.
Like them, but I generally do this by myself. And in having to deal with a snake that large, cleaning cage, stuff happens. I was like, no. So, they started talking. It's been, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years ago. And they actually passed the law where it was illegal for any kind of Burmese or different transactions across state lines. I don't know if it elevated it to a certain CITES standard or it just made it illegal because you violate Lacey Act. So I had talked with Bob Clark, and I got mine as captive bred through Bob Clark. Just because in the state of Texas, if I could ship nowhere else but Texas, I do a lot of shows. Texas is huge. So I wouldn't have a problem. If I lived in Rhode Island, not so much. You're strapped and you got 4 people maybe that, maybe into snakes that you kind of sell to, as long as you were restricted in that state boundaries. That has since been rescinded. So we're able to ship across state lines or whatever. So it's not a problem now, but it's kind of looking forward to the future. Kind of like Nick said at one time, that's the reason Nick had retics. Not much of a retic guy, but he's like, I don't want to get to a point where somebody says what I can and can't have. And I don't want something to be lost. So you have stuff in the state so that at least somebody in the state has it.
Yeah. And I mean, how many people are breeding the dwarf Burmese in America?
Right now, I know of 3.
That's wild. Yeah.
So it's been 3 years since I had my first clutch, and it was I'm not going to necessarily say it was a nightmare, but it was different in trying to figure out exactly what I needed to do to try to get them to breed. Either I was pairing them too late, too early, temperatures wasn't right. And I think I finally got the gist of it down now. And hopefully the babies that are out there now should, over the next couple of years, have a little bit more. But it was so restricted that a lot of it was wild caught animals, and they got acclimated, or people that got captive bred and wound up with 2 males, 2 females, or one died, and they just didn't have a mate. And so for a long time, from the moment I had them raising up and I started breeding, and I didn't have no success that year. I had people reach out, hey, do you want to get rid of them? I just want the male, or I just want the female, or look, I just buy the pair. So I have them. I'm like, no, I just wanted to kind of stick with it because I didn't want to invest in a project and then just like, wash my hands. It didn't breed this year, I'm done. I wanted to kind of stick with it and kind of figure it out. And so I think I have. And like I said, there's only 3 people that I know in the United States currently producing dwarf Burmese. Hopefully in the next few years, there should be some more as these babies get older. But I did find myself holding back a pair from the first breeding just so I would have backups. If I really thought about it back then, I should have got more, but it was, finance, room, space. Let me just get a pair.
Yeah.
But if one of them had passed away during that time, I'd have been like everybody else. So
Are they sort of a finicky animal? I mean, are they pretty hardy, or is it just that they're not too easy to breed, or just that there wasn't a ton imported to begin with, and there's not a lot of pure animals available?
I think it's combination of the last two. Probably, I think they're a pretty hardy animal. I'm not sure of exact numbers and how much stuff was imported in. I know between Bob Clark, I think my first dwarf burns I seen were Bob Clark's at a show back in like the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just kind of, you'd see a couple and then they just kind of disappeared. Every once in a while, he'd have some captive bred on his table, and then it was it. And so I think I got my pair from his last captive breeding. And I don't think it was him not trying. I think just animals, either got older, wild caught, you don't know how old they are, you don't know kind of, life they had, and it just didn't do well. So, animals just started dying off. I found them to be pretty hardy. I think their breeding is maybe a little different, but I didn't really breed the actual Burmese. So, I was kind of just putting two and two together and kind of figuring out my own way. Because it's like, I can tell you how to breed carpet pythons here for me. It may work for you in Florida, but somebody in Minnesota, it may not work as well.
Yeah.
Eric Burke up at, say, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, may not work as well because temperatures, different aspect, humidity always plays effect in it. So you kind of have to get basic guidelines and kind of go off of that and then find out what works for you. And you kind of dial in like, hey, I need to keep my temps at this. I need to spray these. Like during the summer, like I got to spray my stuff at least once a week because it gets really hot, really dry, and room can really dry out. So even wet rip to chip, I mean, the next day it's already starting to dry out.
Sure.
So, certain species you have to kind of mist down and kind of keep on top of it. Just to make sure that, you're providing the best you can for the animal.
Yeah. What is your humidity out there kind of outside?
I'm going to say I'm probably 40 to 50, maybe.
Okay. So not too bad.
Yeah. We're not far from, I'm about 3.5 hours from Houston. So 5 from Galveston. So you do have a lot of that humidity that kind of comes up. I made the joke, like I said, last week I was in Kansas at a show and I visited my uncle and it was like 20 degrees, 28. And I talked to my wife and I said, but it's a dry 28. She's like, no, because there's not as much humidity. So, it can be 28 and maybe feel 25. You can come down here and it's 50 and it feels like 39 because of wind and humidity. It drops and feels so different. So even though it was colder temperature wise, it might have felt the same up there in the 20s as it does maybe in the 40s down here.
Yeah.
So that humidity and stuff kind of plays effect in it. So yeah, because we always hear people talk about Arizona. Oh, but it's a dry heat. I was like, yeah, no, it was dry cold.
That is a real thing. I mean, when it's 43 degrees here in Florida and the humidity is high, it is cold, because that all that moisture is like cold and clinging to your body.
Yep.
It's a huge difference. And
then you get dead of summer and it's really dry. So then humidity outside is maybe 15, 20%.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it can get, we've had, drought during summer where it doesn't rain for 30 days, temperatures above 100 degrees. Yeah, there's not much humidity out there.
Yeah.
So, you're having to alter stuff as you go.
Yeah, we get the opposite. When it's summertime, we get all the heat and all the humidity at the same time.
Yeah.
But inside the house is surprisingly really dried out because the AC is running so much that it's just pulling all the moisture out of the air. So I've found that my humidifier in my snake room here runs way more during the summer than it is during the winter because the AC is running more.
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, that's a big thing. Like I during the winter I missed a lot less. It's maybe once or twice a week compared to 3 times during the summer, and just
Hmm.
trying to keep that relative humidity up. I mean, it gets bad during the summer. I noticed one of my boas, her eye caps actually had a dimple on each of them, and it was just from it being so dry in the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
You miss one misting and it dries out,
Hmm.
especially with the heat going, the heating elements and everything going too, and that just makes it
Yeah.
worse. What so which Antaresia do you have, and which ones do you plan on expanding and getting more of them?
So I currently have children's, spotteds, and Stimsoni. I would love to get the pygmies at some point. Um, so I've got to do a little bit more research now. I mean, I've kind of watched through Discord chat and then, the book. There's more than just the four we always kind of believed, and I'm still in the bandwagon. I don't really. Children's are not Stimsons. They're
Yeah.
different. So I keep them that way, and I think it's more of a geographical range. I could be wrong. I got to go back and look at the book. So I'm probably talking ignorant right now. Um, but I would love to get some of the T positive children's and kind of work with those. I like the look of those. Right now, I have just normal spotted and granites, and Stimsons. I have kind of the normal Easterns, and then I picked up some wheat belts from TJW. I can't think of his name
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
Will and Philippek.
Yeah, William Philippek
Yeah,
in Missouri. Yeah, so I picked up a pair of wheat belts, and so I'm raising them up. Those are really such a different look,
they're so
and
beautiful.
yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I got to get more of those. So, um, and it's trying to find your time. Because with anything, any species you breed, you always got one or two stragglers that feed well. You've got to alter different stuff to get them to feed. So when you do a lot with Antaresia, like your whole clutches, almost you're having to alter. And so I picked up some gray bands recently. They're going to be the same kind of issue. So, how much headache do you want to have in addition to work, taking care of the snakes and everything else? And then the pygmies being so small, it's like, but it's just the fact of having the smallest python, I think would be really, really cool. And I work with the other
Yeah.
three, so might as
Yeah,
well.
the pygmies, they terrify me. Like just the idea of getting babies started. It's such a small baby. It's
Yeah. Well, I've done, the African house snakes, and I've had to do the pinky tails. I've done children's where I had to do little pinky tails
wow.
until you can kind of get them started, just because I've had some that hatch so much smaller than others. Um, so yeah, I've kind of got the experience. It's just that time when you start doing the tails and stuff like that, and you start trying to get their gut and everything, digestive juices flowing, you've got to be on top of it. So you every 4 or 5 days, you kind of got to get them so that it has that drive, so that they really try to strike at food instead of you constantly having to do the tails and get size. You start
Mhm.
to get them to have a drive to food.
How do you get your spotted started? Are they pretty easy because they're a little bit bigger?
Spotteds generally go to pinkies a little easier than the children's. I haven't bred Stimsons yet. This should be my first year, so I don't know about those babies yet. But spotted generally go to pinkies pretty quick. Children's are a little bit more work. I've where I used to live, and I do have a couple out here now. Mediterranean house geckos.
Hmm.
You generally find outside. Sometimes I would, wash the pinkies, a little soap and water, get the pinky smell off. I would capture one of those, put it in, kind of rub it on the snake. I mean the pinkies and stuff on the gecko, and a lot of times I get the babies to eat off of that,
Hmm.
and a meal or two, and then switch, or don't wash with the soap and water, maybe just water. or just the pinky with the gecko. And so you kind of step process it and then get them to eat that way. And it seemed to work when you don't have those that kind of go right off the jump.
Yeah.
But you may be surprised. Sometimes you'll have something go right off the jump. Spotteds I found tend to be the ones that if anybody's going to go off the jump, straight mice pinkies pretty quick, it's going to be spotteds.
And how old are those pinkies? Like day old?
I try to get the smallest ones. So what they call the red hots.
Yeah.
A lot of times with who you do for food source, it's hard to get red hots. You can get smalls or extra smalls, or you can just get pinkies. And so sometimes you get some bigger and some smallers. The children's you're going to have to probably go with red hots a little bit more, just because they're smaller. Spotteds, and sometimes it just depends on the clutch. You can have some that hatch a little bit bigger, and so they can just take, the regular average pinky. But you try to get the smallest ones, that you can. So that's one thing I don't have yet. I'm not breeding mice. I've done rats for a long time. Mice just seem to stink worse. And I don't know if it's more of the ammonia smell or what it is, but they just seem to stink worse. So I've kind of shied away from them. And it was easy for rats because most everything I did was big. I could buy, frozen mice and then work my way into feeding them, rats and stuff. So, but I'm finding that I really need to have a small colony of mice going and maybe some ASFs, just to have that little bit of different smell that some of them require. And then just do the rats, and still buy from outside. I would love to produce all my own, but that's a lot of freaking work.
Yeah, I know. I keep thinking, I think that once I actually start producing animals, that's when I'll start producing mice. For right now, I don't think it's worth the effort, cause I can just, but yeah, when I need those red hots, and I need live, to help entice, I think that'll be the move for sure.
And I found too, it works easier having that live movement.
Yeah.
With me not breeding mice and you're trying to feed those Enteresia, and so you're trying to do a frozen thaw, it's just motionless. It's just sitting there. So you need something that has a little bit of movement, even if it doesn't have the mouse smell, it has the gecko smell, and sometimes even just the mouse smell, but it's the movement that triggers them. And so needing to have that source, it was like, I really got to have that because for me, buying mice, I generally, like for baby ball pythons, kind of start on hopper mice to small mice and live. They don't really do frozen thaw. Every once in a while you'll have one. So I will drive to go pick up some mice. And for me, close to one is about a 60-mile round trip.
Damn.
And I might spend $10 for a couple of mice. And then it frustrates me to no end when I get them home and then the snake won't freaking eat them.
Yeah.
But trying to go somewhere and get somebody who has some just, you'd almost have to be on standby. Oh, my baby just had red hots. Fly, go out there, get some, get them home, and then whether they eat or not. Well, you really need them in a certain time frame from when that snake is hatched out, shed. You start waiting weeks, waiting to get some red hots. You're kind of missing a window. And for me, I found children's tend to do better if I wait to their second shed before I really start trying to offer food.
Wow.
Spotteds are different. But this is, of course, going with no live mice pinkies. The children's might start a little quicker if I had live mice pinkies to start with about that movement and stuff. But having to do with frozen thawed, you kind of have to figure different ways. So sometimes they're headache, and sometimes you like I said, you get them going pretty good. But yeah, they're fun. I mean, I like them. It's just everything's not peaches and cream.
Yeah. What age and or weight? What do you go off of when you start breeding Antaresia or spotteds or children's? Are you going off of age or weight? Do you weigh your snakes?
I've talked to people at different times, and I'll be honest, I don't do a weight. I've really never looked at weight. I would probably do age more than anything. But it's also looking at just the animal. Does it look big enough? Kind of know what the standard is. Does it look old enough to breed? There for a long time, there was guidelines on ball pythons. Well, you got to have your female at least 1,500 grams and the male has to be 500. And so there was all these books, there was all this publication. And the last thing I know is I don't see a male snake cruising around in the wild and see this cute female and say, can you please get on the scale? I need to see if you're big enough to breed. They go up. If she's receptive, she was big enough.
Yeah.
She knows her body better than anybody else. So, I've had male ball pythons that bred at 342 grams.
Wow.
I just put them in a cage to see what would happen. Now, generally, that's not a standard, but I have had those strong breeders that had a strong breeding gene. They would breed early. I mean, I've seen people do ball pythons at less than 1,500. I had an adult female that no matter what amount of food she ate, she never got past about 1,300 grams.
Wow.
She bred. She just, some of them don't get, this standard size. So if I kept going by a standard size, then that snake would never breed.
Yeah.
And she was a wild caught that I'd had for a while. So I knew she was plenty old enough. And it was, put the male in. If she's receptive, she knows that she was able to, reproduce. But me going by standards would go, oh, no, she can't. So kind of got to read the snakes and know whether they're of size or not by look. And, I don't try to breed this really long, skinny. I don't think you're going to do it. Even if I want to say, hey, I want to produce some of this, if I don't think they're of sufficient size, I just won't breed them. But for me, it goes by just looking at them.
And you do the same thing with your carpets? You just go based off of their appearance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the youngest you've bred a carpet?
Females, probably. I would have to go back and look. Might say 3.5 roughly, but I think more about 4 years old.
Yeah.
Just didn't know their size because they've got a little bit more growth, and I don't really do this power feeding thing so I can get them up. I think I've heard Nick mention ages ago with like Bredl's pythons. You can feed and feed and feed. You can get this Bredl's up to like breeding size in 2 years, but they're not going to breed unless they're about 4. Wow. So there's kind of a maturity level in the genes of the snake that knows, okay, I may be of size, but I'm not maybe intellectually or that's probably the wrong word, but they just know it's not time.
Sure.
So, you can get stuff up to size, but why push and try to get this snake up to a certain size if it really kind of, I guess, genetically programmed not to breed that size, and then you can shorten the snake's lifespan
dramatically. Yeah.
It's kind of a really bad scenario, but I would say human beings, you can have a young girl that technically can have babies at 13, 14, 15, just biologically, but it's not good in their body.
Yeah.
So you want them more mature. They're intellectually not ready. There's a lot of factors into it, but biologically they can.
Yeah.
But the other factors is you need to be older. You need more, calcium. You need different things. And so getting a snake at a small size too, yes, you could, but it's not going to be good long term.
Yeah.
So, you just wait another year. So, if you're really in it for the love of the animals, the love of the reptiles, it doesn't hurt you to wait an extra year.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're all about pumping out, producing money, you're going to take shortcuts.
Yeah.
I think
you're probably in the wrong hobby too. You're probably looking for the wrong reason to make money.
I think I heard Lucas Bognera on your podcast this last weekend. And he was saying that, if you really in it for money and you start doing it full time, then you start to kind of take shortcuts.
Yep.
And then it was like, okay, well, my family needs to feed. This snake's not going to feed enough, but I need you to breed. So either I'm going to pump you full of food real quick, or you're not going to get as much. And so you're substandard your animals when you're trying to produce quality animals, and you can't really do that. So you want to be long term, not just fly by night. and being in this hobby for 30 plus years, breeding for 26, because my oldest daughter's 26. So I've been breeding at least 26. Be long-term. I've seen too many people get some money, throw some money down, try to breed, and they're out.
Yeah.
They didn't realize, because us breeding snakes, honestly, and I was talking to somebody the other day, I said, I'm really a glorified snake crap cleaner is what I am. The snakes do all the work. All I do is adjust their temperatures, food intake, pair them up. Basically, all I'm doing is clean and poop. So, but then when you start trying to do the whole process, you're not only the breeder, you're the maintenance guy, you're the janitor, you're your own marketing agent, business agent, PR guy. You have all these different hats you have to wear. This is not just breeding and selling and promoting yourself and promoting the snakes is a lot of work all the way around. There's a lot of different hats you have to wear. And so a lot of people are great at breeding, but they fall short at everything else. And I mean, that's all of us. We love the animals, we love breeding and producing, but we don't, man, I may not be the best salesman. I mean, I actually talked myself out of a snake sale. The guy was looking for carpet python off Morph Market, and he's like, "Oh, I've kept a corn snake, ages ago. Do you think?" Well, no, it's probably not your best choice right off. What other experience have you had? If you even held a carpet python before, and he just never responded. So I lost that sale, I guess. But I would rather be more confident in somebody getting the animal and knowing they're going to be able to take care of it and be prepared for it than get something, it bites them, I'm done, I'm scared, I'm out of it.
Yeah.
Or it winds up on Craigslist, and there ain't no telling who gets it then. So if I have to lose a sale that way, I'll just suck it up. Somebody will, get it down the road.
Yeah. And it becomes like a whole different thing too, right? When you go from ball python to carpet python, right? Like for caging requirements and everything like that too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different ball game.
Yeah. I mean, you've got the difference between cage size. Do you need as many hides?
Yeah.
Display. A carpet's going to display a little bit more. It's going to be out during the day cruising. It's going to be visible. So I can set up, say, I want this really nice display animal in my living room, or as a kid, I wanted one on my dresser, but I want a ball python. Well, guess what? It's not going to display well. You can take it out anytime you want to, hold it, sit in your lap, watch TV, read a book. It's going to hang out with you. But if you want something that's going to display in a cage, that's not the one. So, all these have their kind of pros and cons. Corn snakes, different rat snakes, they'll display well.
Yeah.
You give them a good cage, you get some plants and you get some sticks, and, you could really set up a nice cage and they'll display. But, there's you have to look at, the possibility of getting bit. I mean, most people that, man, if I could, every time somebody asked me to snake bite at a show, I would be a millionaire if they gave me $1. Like, I tell them, I'm like, anything with teeth can bite.
Yeah.
And most of the time when a parent's in there, and I turn around and say, even kids, and every parent can tell you, kids bit. They don't, when they're learning their teeth and everything, you've been bit. Every parent's been bit by a kid.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, they're like, yep, already know. So they can translate to their kid in a better understanding than I might be able to, being that they understand, hey, kids can bite as well. So, what I'm saying? They have this better understanding. I can't control what the snake does. Now, as a ball python, I can let you handle it and be pretty confident it's not going to bite you.
Yeah.
Carpet, it depends on the species I have, or the one that's been there and held out, over and over. I'm holding at the show and is kind of a little more acclimated to the surroundings. But yeah, anything with teeth can bite. So, and most of them, it shows you put stuff in a tub or in these display cases, and sometimes you travel, anywhere from 2 to 7 hours to a show or longer. And then you get them out, You display them out in bright lights. You've got all of these people walking past, different smells, stronger lights than you're probably used to, just very, very stressful. And then you expect the snake not to bite somebody. In my snake room, it's me. They don't have constant commotion. Any of the smells is probably the other snakes, or like if I just got off of work, it's probably my body odor, or coming from the rat room, it's probably rats. They have a typical, hey, these are what the smells I'm used to smelling. And I don't have constant commotion in front of my, cage. If I want to hide, they can. At the show, they're wide out and open all day, every day until, you get them back home. So yeah, they can be stressed. And then when you get them back home, sometimes that first day or two, like they're getting back up to, temperature, being warmed up where they need to be. They're like, look, they'll let you know, hey, you stress me out.
Yeah.
So once they kind of get back to it, they're good. But
oh yeah, I've had my Argentine has never struck at me. My big female, she's totally laid back, totally chill. But she smashed into the glass the other day when my dog came in my office.
Yeah.
I mean, he came through the door and just, did a lap of the room and was going to leave. And as he passed her cage, she just pounded into the glass. So I don't know, I don't know if it was just her, seeing this 4-legged animal go by or what it was, and it's a yellow lab. So he's hefty. It's not like it's a small dog.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gotta be crazy for these animals to have all this different stimulus thrown at them at a show, and just all these people walking by and touching and bumping into the table and all that.
Well, you got to think of it. And so when you said that, it kind of reminded me, so they see an infrared image, much like, I've said, movie Predator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, it saw an infrared image. So when your dog walked by, it just saw infrared image. So it struck out. So when you're at a show and you've got all these people, these are infrared images that are larger than the snake. The snake realizes that typically something that's larger than them is trying to eat them or harm them. And so they're going to be a little defensive. Whereas, if it's smaller than them and it comes, hey, I can eat it. And so they're going to have a whole different. So that's a feeding response. And that's going to be a different bite.
Yeah.
It's going to bite and rat.
Yeah. I wonder if it was a feeding response with my dog or if it was just defensive, just having this.
Yeah.
This
I would say it was probably defensive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny when I go in there, she doesn't even lift her head up, but she probably smells me coming, and just knows the difference. Like you said, she just expects, you got to imagine that their sense of smell is incredible because they know when there's rats out in the room before you even open their cage door.
Oh yeah.
It's wild. It's wild. You get over to a rack that doesn't even have that great of airflow and you open it up and everybody's keyed in, and ready to go.
Yeah. You got to watch those aggressive feeders coming out real quick. So yeah, we call it charging the room, defrosting the rats out like that. That also helps for those troubled ones that don't want to eat is having your, because I actually have a snake room. So having those rodents kind of defrost out in the room, it just kind of has that smell about. So everybody's kind of active and you're hoping that kind of triggers something. Because, think about it. You're driving down the road, going somewhere, and all of a sudden you can smell, man, there's Burger King. I smell burgers, or I smell fried chicken, or I smell this. Your stomach just starts growling automatically. Yeah. And it's not like, hey, I said I'm hungry. The smell of food triggers that response. Yeah. And in snakes, and I think there's supposed to be some studies being done, but they don't constantly produce stomach acid like we do. So if they did, as strong as their stomach acid is to digest bone and everything else, it'd eat right through the stomach, if it was constantly producing. So once they're done, digesting their food, it doesn't really kick in until food. Then it kicks in. Where we're constantly producing. That's that stomach growling. That's, you get them pains, and for some people it winds up going to like stomach ulcers because you're constantly producing a gastric acid. Whereas reptiles, I don't know if it's all reptiles, but I know in snakes it doesn't until kind of that moment of feed because it's so strong and so powerful.
Wow.
I mean, to digest bone, that's got to
It's
be some strong
intense.
stuff.
Yeah, it's intense. I know that if humans smell sweet things, your body's insulin increases.
Okay.
Just from the smell of something sweet makes you
Yeah,
produce more insulin, which
I
is
can see
just,
that.
isn't that wild? It's like your body is preparing you for the ingestion of this sweet food item.
Man,
But
yeah.
so with the carpets and getting them started, I got one that was only wanted live, right? Did
Mhm.
not want anything. I have a jungle. He doesn't want anything to do with any frozen thawed rodents. And I tried and tried, and I kept trying to get him switched over to frozen thawed. And it ended up that he was eating way undersized prey items because
Okay.
I didn't want to give him a medium mouse that could do damage to him. He's a
Mhm.
beautiful animal.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was I just gave him quail because he would take frozen thawed quail like without fail. He's all over
Uh-huh.
the quail. And I've just kind of, like you said, that frustration. Even he wasn't taking live mice at a certain point,
Okay.
and that frustration of I'm kind of in your scenario too, where my closest feeder supply for live rodents is probably about 45 minutes away from me.
Mhm.
So, you go through all this effort to get this one mouse in a bag, and then you throw it in, and he just looks at it and then ends up defensively striking it
Uh-huh.
and won't wrap it. And it just got to the point where then I threw a quail in and he was all over it. And I'm like, all right, so you're just going to eat birds for your whole life then, I guess, and I have like, do you have any like that you couldn't get switched over to frozen thawed or are strictly bird eaters?
No, I've got a couple. I've got some that started different ways. So even like the dwarf burms, I had some that refused mice, refused rats, uh, frozen thawed, refused live rats, but I got it to start on quail. Then I've had some that started on live rat right off the jump.
Hmm.
Um, I would suggest maybe, once it can get to a size where it might be able to up the quail, like get a frozen mouse of smaller size and kind of wash it. Get some of that mouse smell off, or even with like Dawn detergent,
Mm-hmm.
and get a lot of that off, and just rub it all over the quail. Keep them in the same bag, warm them up together, and then kind of feed it right after each other. As soon as the quail, because it would need a larger meal, they're already in that mood to try to eat. You hit them with that the mouse that's got the quail scent.
Yeah.
Then if you can get one or two maybe that way, then the next time you try without the dish soap, you just try like water. So it has a little bit of the mouse smell, but it keeps being mixed with a quail, because birds are great, but I think long term you're going to want a little bit more. I don't know if they get as much calcium from the bone. They tend to have more of a hollow bone than rodents do.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much calcium they're getting. I know typically a straight bird diet, they're going to have a really runny crap.
Yeah, he does that.
So yeah, that's from birds. I don't know what it is, but birds typically are runny stools.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gotten better. In the
Mhm.
beginning, it was really bad.
Yeah,
But since he's been solely on birds, it's gotten a lot better. And, I just figured rather than staying frustrated because it was so insanely
yeah,
frustrating, I was like, you know what, just whatever, you eat your quail. The quail aren't that expensive. Uh,
yeah.
but I actually have a couple other jungles that went for live, won't go for frozen thawed. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Maybe I thaw in water. How do you thaw your rodents?
So it depends. When I'm feeding a lot of my bigger stuff, I actually have these fiberglass trays like you used to find at like a Luby's cafeteria or any of those. Even when we were in school, I think most of those were plastic, but I got some of their fiberglass.
Yeah.
And my medium, larger rats, I will pull them out in the frozen bag and let them sit out overnight, so they kind of defrost and warm up to room temp. And then I use heat lamps. Well, heat lamps, they're light bulbs, but I'm gonna have to find another source because you can't find incandescent bulbs anymore.
Mm.
So I do water on smaller stuff like a hot water, and sometimes the hot water and the dripping of the hot water on a small snake triggers that kind of response.
Mm.
Um, I've seen guys that do like they're doing medium rats and it's sopping wet, and I look at it as like, man, that doesn't look appetizing to me at all. And they're like, but you're not eating, it's a snake. I know, but it's a sopping wet rat. It just doesn't look right. Like they're not catching they're not, going for swamp rats. They're in the woods looking for rats. So, it doesn't have the same thing. They eat it, it's fine. But depending on the bedding you have it at, you can get, aspen or whatever that sticks to the, rodent and they're ingesting. So I try to minimize that by, just heating them up. But I found I've got some baby carpets that if I do under straight the heat lamp, they don't like that dry rodent. They'd rather have a wet rodent. So I have to write down, wet mouse fuzzy, that's what they're eating right now. So I want to get consistent eating and then start trying to switch you over. I've had some that strictly stuck on live. I had a male IJ ages ago that would only eat live mice.
Mm.
Well, no, he ate frozen thaw, but he would only eat mice. And I need to switch to rats. So I virtually starved him for a year.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is I would offer a rat, he'd bite and realize it was rat, let go, and wouldn't mess with it. So I let him do that every time I'm feeding. So I let him go, I always offered, every time I was feeding. So I let him probably go month and a half, and then I feel bad. So because I had to feed like 6 or 7 mice at a time, one right there because he was an adult male.
That's insane.
And so then I'd let him kind of starve out for a little bit, hoping, hey, you'd go for the rat, and he wouldn't. So he probably ate 4, 5 times the entire year.
Wow.
Went into breeding season. After breeding season, he didn't care what I threw in there. He ate. So right after that, I offered him a small rat, and he jumped on it and never looked back.
Wow.
Now that worked that time. I don't know if it'll ever work again or for whatever else. But yeah, so I try to get, especially IJs, I've known they can get stuck on mice a little easier than the others. Carpets, coastal don't seem to really matter. IJs or Papuans typically can get stuck on mice. So I try to switch them over to rats a little quicker.
Yeah.
I have started on rat pinkies before, but I like to try to start on mice fuzzies so they get a little bit more calcium because they're growing. Yeah. And rat pinky is really nothing more than a bunch of fat. So you want a little bit of bone structure, calcium that they're getting from the food as they're starting to grow. Then you can kind of add more fat. But I try to offer the rat pinkies, first 10, 12 meals somewhere in there to get them onto rats. Because otherwise you get this, stuck on mice. And I've seen a couple jungle carpets that were the same way, where they just stuck on mice. So, maybe African soft fur might work. I haven't seen a single one that turned down an African soft fur.
Now you got me nervous because I've got all mine on mice, aside from the ones that eat birds. But I do have two other jungles that I'm giving mice to, but kind of like yours, your pop one that would grab and then let go when he realized it was a rat.
Uh-huh.
He'll grab the mouse and wrap it and then drop it and just not want to mess with it. And I'll have to actually reheat it and then offer it again, and he'll grab it and do the same thing. And what I did was I took some of the quail that I have, and I just trimmed off the tiniest little bit of down, like the fluff that they have under their wings, and just pressed a little bit of that onto the head. And then he was crazy about it. But I'm not going full bird with him. I'm not going to end up with all these jungles that are just eating birds. So I'm going to try to do that and then reduce the amount of down until it's nothing, and they're just taking the mice.
Yeah. I've done that a couple times on some of my smaller carpets. Then I'm having to, they don't want to eat the mice or whatever, so I'm having to scent with quail or something like that because they do typically like the bird. I've seen too, like you get one that, like you said, bite, they might wrap and then they leave it. So I've got to where sometimes I would reheat. Sometimes, I mean, it may be 20 minutes later and I go by and they had, I pick it up. I make them mad. Like I keep putting it in front of their face. I make you really wrap. Once you wrap it, I start tugging on it. Like this thing's really trying to get away. Sometimes they'll go ahead and they just got so frustrated, they go ahead and eat it. So I'm like, cool, win. Other times, like I said, they just will refuse to. So then you got to resort to other techniques. But yeah, I've got a couple of ball pythons do the same thing that I've got to do it second time. And sometimes I get frustrated. I'm like, I'm not even going to reheat this. If you're going to eat it, you're going to eat it cold like it is right now. And just, and they do.
Now, what's the deal with, do you have any that eat, they're just drop feeders where you just put it in very quietly and carefully and then push the tub closed and walk away and then they eat? Do you have any like that? Where you like, if it's like, it'll scare the bejesus out of them if you dangle it in front of them or anything like that.
Yeah, I do kind of have a few. I noticed in some of my hog nose, and what was the other one? I want to say it was the glossy snakes, but I think glossy snakes pretty well jumped on it pretty quick. But yeah, I don't know about being timid, other than they just didn't come, because a lot of hog nose will come flying out the cage, mouth open, they're ready for everything.
Yeah.
And so I would have a couple that wouldn't. So I would just, put it in there, come back 10, 15 minutes later, it's gone. So I don't know if they were more of a shy feeder or they just wasn't right there, smelled the room and was all over. Most all the dark carpets, they're ready for it. Like you said, charge the room. They smell it. They're you open that cage, you got to watch where your hands are at. They're ready for that rat.
Yeah, and what I've noticed is that my more aggressive or defensive carpets are the ones that eat the best. The ones that are snappy and just, they seem like they're pissed about everything. If you touch them on their back, they're pissed about it, and all this. Those are the ones that will never turn down a meal. But then, you have this beautiful, gentle jungle that has never struck at you and seems more interested in getting away. That's the one that, that's my guy that only eats birds, and
yeah. You said that and I thought it was funny. I had a snowcorn adult male that I'd had a long time ago, and it had ate basically frozen thawed all its life. I was cleaning rat room one day and I got a little small rat fuzzy and put it in a cage. This corn snake was scared to death of it. It flew to, I'm like, it's a rodent. You've been eating these frozen thawed all this time. You're scared of this live. Like 15 minutes later, I mean, he's still huddled in the corner, scared to death. I had to take it out. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? So, yeah, they something about sometimes the timid feeders. And I think that's what with carpets too. And everybody wants a very nice laid back, I want this pet snake. Those that are a little bit more on edge tend to be greater feeders.
Yeah.
Greater breeders and long term. I mean, if you just want something that's going to be a pet, like I want a carpet that's just going to be just a pet and you want to hold it and go in the cage all the time. I've seen some that still are pretty great breeders. I've got a female het granite Papuan that gorgeous. Like really, I can go in a cage pretty much and just pick her up by hand. The male, not so much. But she's pretty one, and she's a great breeder. But it just seems like most of those that are a little bit more on edge tend to be greater breeders. And I was at a snake show probably 10, 12 years ago, and a friend of mine had a California King, and he was selling it, and there was a guy on the other side of the table, and they were talking back and forth, and I think it was Michael Price, and he was holding it, and this California King just snacked on his hand and just, couldn't get it off. And he's like, excuse me, went to the bathroom, got the hot water, cold water, got it off, came back, showing it to him again, snake bit him again. Went back to the bathroom, did the same thing, came back, like, okay, I'm gonna put it in the tub. And the dude on the other side of the table bought it. His wife looked at him like he was the craziest SOB alive. And he said, that's going to be a good breeder.
Wow.
It's got that edge. It's kind of got that wild nature. So instinctively, there's certain things they know to do to survive: feed, hide, mate.
Yeah.
So
And stay alive.
and stay alive. So if you're placid and laid back, you're not really going to stay alive when you're confronted with different things. But if you have a little edge about you, and so that's what I kind of tell people with carpet pythons, they have a little, especially when they're babies. Everything in Australia is kind of bigger than them and out to eat them. You've got, womas and black-headed pythons, depending on range, that eat other snakes. You've got monitor lizards. You have, people that probably hunt snakes to eat. So everything's bigger than them. They've got to have stand their ground. So you've got to have a little edge. Once they get size, they become more confident in who they are. And, then they can mellow out a little bit. So it's like taking a kid that got bullied in school and very timid, and then you put him in Taekwondo and he starts taking lessons and he becomes more confident in himself. He's not as timid anymore.
Yeah.
And once they kind of stand their ground, then they can kind of let their guard down and be them without always having to be timid or always having to be aggressive. They can tend to be themselves. And that's kind of the way the carpet pythons do.
Yeah. Yeah. As they get bigger, they get more confident and,
Mm-hmm.
and laid back. And yeah. And then, I've got this beautiful jungle from Nick, and the other day I was holding her, and she was pretty chilled out and pretty laid back. And my kids came up and they're like, "Can we hold her?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure," and I look over and I do something with my other hand, and she swipes at my face, and like totally out of nowhere. I don't know what it was, if it was because I looked away, to go grab
Mm-hmm.
something. And as soon as my head turned, I was like, "Nah, well, you guys can hold a ball python or something."
Yeah. Yeah. When they're young like that, so my daughters, we were at a show when they were younger, and they wanted to hold I had some Jaguar carpets back then, and they wanted to hold it. Just it wrapped up around their arm, just lovely. And my other daughter wanted to hold one, so she reached in the cage and got it, and it hit her. Boom, got her. The whole place shut down because she screamed. Everybody just got quiet. It's one of those where you hear the pin drop.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's okay. She's okay. She's got bit by a snake. She's good. And I was like, I told you, don't reach in on the carpets. Corn snake, fine. Grab it all you want. Ball python, grab it all you want. Don't reach in with the carpets.
Yeah.
Let me get it out. And then you can, kind of, because all of them, like I said, it to show we're stressed. So there's actually a way that I found when you grabbing a younger one is you kind of cup your hand. If you've got little fingers going in, they see like, bite points. But that cup, there's no way they can cup on the inside of your hand to bite. So you just pull them out, then hold them, and then let them move around and be confident where they're at. And a lot of them, snakes don't like being touched on top of their head, chin rubs, especially when you're young. If you work with them a lot and that's how you handle them, they can get used to it. But like ball pythons, that's their defense mechanism. You touch them on the back of the head, they want to roll up in a ball. So I'm in a show when somebody's holding one, like, do not touch the back of the head because you're going to scare the snake. It moves, you freak out and drop it. So don't touch the back of the head, touch the body, hold it, whatever. And a lot of times it's kind of the first one I get people that have never held a snake before that want to hold because it doesn't really move. It might move a little bit, but that's how you kind of get them in. And then they realize, hey, a snake's not slimy like we always got told.
Yeah.
Scale different, feels different. And then they become a little more confident. Then it gets them into, okay, it's not as bad to hold, and then they start working with different stuff. So, that's how I like kind of introducing them.
Yeah.
I have friends that they're not into snakes. Typically, everybody at my church, it's a typical African-American church. Snakes, nope. Always been taught they're evil, whatever. And they're finding out through me that snakes are not what they were always told. I've had several of them come to my house, got to the point where they actually held snakes. Some have come to shows. And what's funny is kids generally don't have a fear of anything.
Yeah.
And so his sons all held a snake. And he's like, I ain't going to get punked out. I'm going to hold a snake. So then he was like, wow, this really isn't what I thought it was. This is really, really cool. Then he looked at his wife. She said, nope, no snakes in the house. I was like, dude, you can come over my house anytime you want to hold snakes, but it opened them up to a whole other possibility that they were unaware of. And I think that's what Steve Irwin did a lot of. And he was crazy. He was Australian, but that little bit of edge and his craziness drew people in.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing, hey, these crocodiles and different stuff that he worked with, they're not as evil and always out to get you as everybody thinks they are. I mean, how many times have we heard the snake of, well, this snake chased me and it's like, oh my gosh, come on, people.
Yeah.
Or the one that goes around on the internet about, the woman that had this big snake and it quit eating and it used to stay in the bed with her when she would, take it out of the cage and it was sizing her up. Like, oh my gosh, like get on the snake's level, realize that's not what it is, and so you get rid of all these misconceptions that people have had for they've been taught through generations that that's not what it is. And I mean, I get them all the time. Hey, when can I come to a snake show with you? When can we come over to your house and hold the snakes or whatever? So I like that aspect that I can open them up to something that's so different that they would have been totally closed out of in different scenarios, different settings. So I like it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love it. And that sizing you up thing, it's crazy. It's crazy. I made a TikTok with my spotted python and it got over
were they eating you? I saw that.
Yeah. It got over 2 million views and there's like thousands of comments and so many of them are people saying it's just seeing if it can eat you and we'll see who's laughing 5 years from now and all this stuff. And it's like they have no idea that a spotted python is going to be like 3.5 feet long, but
yeah,
they're sitting there saying like we'll see where you're at in 5 years when it's 20 feet long. And it's like
you ought to get one of those. I know you've probably seen the California Kings that actually get somebody's finger and start trying to swallow the finger.
Oh yeah.
Like get that. And if they thought that spotted python was bad, wait till it's actually got part of your finger in its mouth. Like, oh my gosh. It's like, it's a snake. Like they get to a certain point, they realize they can't and they back off.
Yeah. And I don't know what her deal was that day. It was just, I was sitting there, I think editing a video and holding her. And I just noticed that she kept doing it. She just kept going around on my hand, trying to find out, hey, can I eat this?
I think it's kind of like a tasting type deal, or because if you notice you holding snakes and typically men, we tend to be hairy armed, like the hair freaks them out. Yeah. So they kind of go and they hit that hair and they kind of jump and they move around. And so then it's like, okay, well, what is this? Stuff they eat has some hair, fur, whatever. So then they kind of get this, let me test the ground and see what this is or whatever. Because I had a boa, I guess it was just a common boa constrictor 20 years ago, something. And feeding rats. I had them old vision cages where you slide the glass and had the rat in the hemostats. And I offered it. Well, it seemed the heat of my hand, but smelled the rat. And it got my hand. And this was a 10-foot girl. She's about 60 pounds. You can just imagine feeding response, bite, rat, whatever. She bit and then she let go. As soon as she bit, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is gonna be painful.
Yeah.
You're trying to get this snake off by yourself. And because they think food's trying to get away, that's when they really dig the teeth in.
Yeah.
She bit and let go.
Wow.
And then took the rat because she realized it was not the rat. Now I was on a graveyard shift, so I went to work that evening, and all these guys like, I'd have killed that snake. And I'm like, dude, it was my fault. My hand swelled up. I mean, and I'm right-handed, so it got the whole hand, teeth prints, swelled the whole hand up. And I'm like, it is what it is. Like, you're crazy. I said, yeah, I know. And it is what it is, Yeah. Once you understand that it wasn't your fault, but then you try to, the next time, how do I keep this incident from happening again? Because it could have been a worse incident, So do I, open the cage from the other side? Visions were real bad about having, that kind of plastic where it had that lip on the inside.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you couldn't really see where the head's at. You kind of see the body. Their head was like right there at the
Yep.
top. And so you did this and it reached around and boom, there's your hand. So you just learn what's my next step and how do I do this, more efficiently later. So, when I'm cleaning cages with a lot of my bigger carpets and stuff, I hook them out. I go in a cage with a hook, kind of kill a feeding response. Then the more you mess with the snakes, whether by hand, pull them out, put them in this tub so I can clean, or if I'm going to have to hook them out. It's not so much about being bit. It's I'm in here to clean cages. I don't want bloody hand, and I'm messing with, crap.
Yeah.
So, now if I'm under the handle, it's different. I get bit, you go on about your business. But if I had to stop every time I got bit when I'm trying to clean cage, I'd never get anything done. So you use those hooks. You use, like a tub lid or something to kind of towards the snake's face, grab their body, put them out. A lot of times by hand, I pull them right back out, put them in the cage. But it's that initial response. How does that snake react? And generally, they cage aggressive.
Yeah.
And it's, I've had people, we take the snake out and feed it in a separate tub so it doesn't become cage aggressive. I don't know how well that works, but when you have over about 4 snakes, it becomes not feasible to work with.
Yeah.
You just find feeding in the cage. And, and then it's like I tell people when they go in the cage, especially with carpets, I always use a snake hook. You don't know if that snake was sleeping or not. If it's moving around, you already know. Like you can open the cage, let the snake kind of come out, slither out on its own, kind of come up from under the body, and you're fine. Reaching in, not so much. But when it's sleeping and you don't know and you startle it, that's a way to get bit. And so I tell people all the time, I said, if you were in bed sleeping, you happen to open your eyes, you saw me standing there, you have a certain response. Right? Everybody can imagine that. But if you were sitting on your front porch and I walk up to you, it's totally different.
Sure.
You're awake, you're alert, whatever. A snake's the same way, and even ball pythons, laid back as they are, you see that snake not moving, it could be asleep, and you don't know because they don't have eyelids.
Yeah.
So, you got to think on their level. You startle them, boom, what's going to happen? Your first response was, if you got a gun under the pillow, you're going to shoot me. If you were asleep, you see me coming up, you can be prepared. Does this look like a sign of danger? Do I need to be prepared? Or is this calm and we can have a conversation? That's how the snake has to look at it. They only got one, bite or flee.
Yeah.
And when it's right there, their first thing is to bite. So,
yeah.
You got to kind of look at it on their level.
Yeah. And just thinking about somebody, I mean, even opening your eyes and seeing somebody stand there, it's worse. Usually I'm sure that by the time you're grabbing them is when they're waking up. So it'd be like somebody yanking you out of your bed while you're sleeping,
and for a snake, it's like the first thing they can do is bite. And you've seen it. They'll bite and they'll step back. Because okay, let me see, assess, like the brain's starting to wake up. Let me assess what the situation is. Do I need to continue to defend myself and strike out, or do I need to run away? Flee. So that first thing is straight bite. So once you understand that, and the same thing when you get somebody that has, say, a ball python in an aquarium, typically you take off the top and you go in from above. Well, what attacks a snake from above? They see heat image, bird of prey. Yeah. They're going to defend themselves. So once you understand those concepts, then it becomes a little more easy to handle the snake and becomes a great captive and you're happy with it. Versus, man, every time I reach in, it bites me. Well, how did you go in? Did you startle the snake? Did you wake it up? If it's moving around, most of the time you can reach in and pick it up. But when it's just stationary, you startled it.
Yeah, I mean, even I've my dog has been bit on the nose by black racers and things like that. And just I don't think he even meant to come across it. But, if he's going through some brush or palmettos or something here, and then all of a sudden I hear a yelp and see the snake flying through the grass, and it's got to be terrible. You got to imagine that snake's probably sleeping, and all of a sudden here's this giant canine, right over it, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, they're, you have to have empathy when you're handling these animals, because they're not us, you know, and you got to kind of put yourself in their shoes, or you're going to think that they're little assholes all the time, you know,
Yeah.
because
And there's something for domestication. Dogs, they descended from wolves and foxes and different stuff, and had been domesticated for tens of thousands of years. So snakes is more of a recent thing, probably what, 150, 200 years,
yeah,
maybe.
maybe,
So we've got a long way. Now I've seen, ball pythons are starting to, outside of their already placid nature, there's certain species that kind of are starting to calm down. I remember when a lot of your retics were, F1s. A lot of the bloods coming in were either wild caught or F1s. So they got a little wild to them. But now you're seeing through progressive captive breedings that they don't start as wild and crazy. Um, Case in point, hognose. Everybody, they'll come up and see these, oh, these are the cute ones. They play dead. And I'm like, they don't do that in captivity. They're like, what? They just don't feel threatened. I've yet to see even a baby that I've had do the whole threat display, flip over, play dead. I've heard a couple people that had them as babies do it. I was at a show and a young lady had one that probably couldn't have been a couple months. It played dead in her hand and she flipped it over and it flipped back over. But I haven't really seen it in captivity. That's a wild thing.
yeah,
And they just don't do it. They just don't feel the same threat nature, I guess, even though it's inherent in their genes. This is through, multiple generations and evolutionary triggers. This is how I stay alive.
yeah,
And so they do that. So it's ingrained in their DNA. It just isn't through captivity and all these breedings. They just don't have that fear. And so I believe it has a lot with, take a snake that we typically breed for color, pattern, or mutation. How many people are actually breeding for temperament,
yeah,
feeding response, great feeder? So if you took a lot of your Antaresia that, children's of spotted and stuff that were, hey, these went on mice pinkies right off the jump, you keep these and become your future breeders, so that future generations, you're not having that same struggle that I've got a gecko scent or whatever. You might still have a few, but you don't have, you might go from a 70% trouble to 30% through future generations, just because you're breeding for different traits that we can't see.
yeah. It makes you wonder what our what captive snakes will be like in 10,000 years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because like you said, I mean, I think that's how long we've been breeding dogs, and it was, I mean, the theory behind that is that they kind of chose us, right? Like
Yeah.
the most laid back wolves would just get closer to humans, and those would breed and get closer, and and then eventually there they are sitting next to us by the fire, picking up the scraps and everything.
Well, I think we fed them once they get a little close, like, oh, it's kind of cool having us around. Let me give you a little food here.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, now I got a food source, so let me stick around. And so it was yeah.
Yeah. And then they got the floppy ears, and yeah, it makes you wonder what the snake hobby will be like. I mean, how long have we been keeping snakes in captivity and breeding them selectively? That has to be less than 100 years, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly when, like, your first zoos. I know there was a lot of people doing research. Actually, it was a book I seen in, what was it, NERBC? It was an auction. It was written in German, I believe, from like 1898. It was called the Vivarium. And it detailed in how to keep, reptiles in basic, I don't know if they were doing aquariums or what, but basically in some kind of cage. Told you how to build these wood cages or whatever. But it's just like keeping. So even in zoos, you would get these weird animals and you would kind of keep in the zoo. So then they kind of had to learn how to take care of it. But as far as captive breeding, I don't know if that's probably been done. And I know there's people with more knowledge than me, but probably since sometime in the 50s.
Yeah.
I think one of the first books was like on corn snake mutations and different stuff was Dr. Betchel sometime in the 50s. So you're looking at maybe 70 years.
Yeah.
And then it started really hitting mainstream probably 90s because you started having a lot of different shows pop up. And there were people breeding stuff before then. Probably Bill Haas, Tom Crutchfield. But like mainstream was probably kind of early 90s. And then the more morphs and stuff started popping up and different stuff, then, that really triggered and fueled the whole kind of mess we call the reptile hobby today.
Yeah. So we've just scratched the surface. I mean, we're just scratching the surface as far as domestication and all that. I mean, I've got my Timor pythons from Ryan, and Ryan, he went through and picked out. I told him, I said, pick me out. Like I said, I want a pet Timor python if there is such a thing. And so like pick me out the ones that are going to be least likely to do the flea and pee, and so he did. So I'm hoping that one day I'll be able to breed these, and I would really like to selectively, breed these, even though they drive me crazy sometimes. You want to get them out to do a little maintenance or something, and they flip around, and there's urates everywhere and the musk, and it's just nasty. And other days they're totally fine, but yeah, they test my patience. But I want to so badly. I want to breed them and get F3s. I think it's.
I like
needed.
that. I like that idea. So I'm one of those that I feel as a successful snake breeder, lizard breeder, whatever, that at some point in time you have to step out of that comfort zone. Like I've been successful with ball pythons and carpets and Antaresia, different species. What about species that are not commonly bred? It's not so much in the snakes, but there's different colubrids, especially like lizards. There's certain lizards that nobody really breed that you would see come in the hobby. They're all wild caught. Some of them die off because they hadn't been taken care of. There's a whole issue on, how stuff comes in and hydration and, parasite load, whatever. But if people spent the time like, hey, I've already bred bearded dragons and this other chuckwalla, so I have an experience with kind of dry desert type species. What about these other lizards that have similar care, but nobody's really breeding them? Like I feel we have somewhat of a responsibility to start working with some of that stuff and maybe getting them established before stuff just disappears. You talk to a lot of guys that have been in the hobby or older hands, been around for a while. There's stuff that you used to be able to get in the hobby that now you can't get because nobody looked in the 70s and 80s about let's try to set up a captive breeding or assurance colony of what's the name? I want to say it's a Cocoan tortoise. I want to say it comes from like Chile, something like that. They used to be imported like crazy in the 70s and 80s, and now closed to import. Like they're done. And now you can't get those. Those are completely lost to the hobby. Every once in a while, maybe like Madagascar would open up, or the West Indies islands, and you were able to get some of the, insular Caribbean type, boas and different stuff like that. But nobody kind of really worked with them. There's starting to be more captive bred now of those, but not as much of certain other species. I mean, I think I've recently seen in recent years more Madagascar hognose, giant hognose, speckleds, and blondes.
Yeah.
Which are the three hognose from Madagascar. I had a giant, and the guy gave me years ago an adult male, but I couldn't find a female.
Yeah.
And so I had to sell it. But nobody was really captive breeding them. Now, Owen McIntyre has been successful. Chris from Bio Boutique has been successful in producing them. So there's stuff to be more captive bred and introduce different stuff to the hobby that's not the normal. It's a ball python with a different color look.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think people are kind of starting to look towards kind of a natural type snake. Because if you've seen, there's been this big flourish for bioactive
Yeah.
enclosures. I mean, we used to still, and I still keep a lot of stuff, basic. You got a tub, you put the snake in with the bedding, whatever. But people are really setting up these elaborate type cages and doing bioactive. Well, a ball python might be great, and it's this different color morph, but it's going to be hidden all day. So if I'm going to have this really nice cage, I want something that displays well. And
Yeah.
so what better than a snake that looks like it is in the wild? And it may be this really cool snake that nobody's really breeding, but if people put some effort into it, you could have the next, maybe not leopard gecko, but something that is out there a little more often.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. You had brought up the threat displays before.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, prime example is the blue tongue skinks, right?
Yep.
You never see them do a threat display in captivity, or at least pretty rarely.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure yours are like, puppies, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
probably not sitting there sticking their tongue out and, doing all that nonsense.
Nope. Only time you see the tongues come out when they're eating.
Yeah.
Not much of a threat display on it. Yeah.
What do you feed your blue tongues?
So I found they really like ripe bananas.
Yeah.
I normally kind of do like the little dog food kind of canisters.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a pate type. It's like duck or beef liver or whatever. They don't like chicken as much. They like strawberries. I'll try to make like a little salad. I think I posted a picture here a while back with them eating like some cut up strawberry and some romaine lettuce and maybe some carrot shreds. They're picky.
Yeah.
They eat most of the strawberry and leave everything else. If they got a little piece of, romaine on their lip, they kind of move their tongue around to get it off. They, you try to give them a balanced diet, but they're not really big on it. They like dubia roaches from time to time. I don't breed them, so I got some, and they got to be smaller. And I think I fed some probably bigger, which they should have been able to eat, but I guess it was more chitin in the shell. And as they kind of chew, and I'm like, okay, cool, they got it, I'm done. Well, I go in the snake room, like the next day, I find this dubia on the other side of the room. Like they didn't eat it, and it got out of the cage. And wound up, I'm like, no, I don't want roaches floating around in my room, so nope. I can't do the dubia. So basically, it's kind of been like the banana, the strawberry, the dog food, kind of mixing a little bit of different stuff and try different stuff to see if they eat it. Just kind of experiment with different stuff. But so far, that's kind of what I found they like to eat. So
nice. And are you doing like a breeding program with them? You got like plans
I think
with them?
we'll try to. I believe right now I have 3 females.
Okay.
Talked with a couple of guys on shed test.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be easier once they get it to be able to do shed test on those for sex determination.
Okay.
Because generally it's hard to tell when they're young, and you wind up buying another one, and then I can wind up with 4 females unless I buy a known male.
Yeah.
And so you're buying an adult already. And because it's only as they get bigger, there's a size differential. There's not so much like on bearded dragons. You can kind of check for hemopino bulges or, waxy secretions from oral pores. They don't really have that. So it's harder to tell on those. And I'm kind of just getting started into it. So there might be a little bit more. People have some techniques that they're using that I'm not familiar with yet. But from what everybody's already kind of told me, I think I've got 3 females.
Well, you're off to a good start.
Up the 2 biggest ones just to see.
Yeah. What happened when you paired them up?
I had one chase the other, but not so much as the whole grab, because they're pretty violent breeders.
I've heard that.
Where they bite, like they're not letting the female get away. They bite, they hold on. So as one started chasing the other one kind of moved around, but they never really, they ran around for a little bit and they rested other sides of the cage. And then they moved around a little bit and rested, but not really let's go for the interaction. And so I did it for a couple of hours just to see while I was in there cleaning. I don't know if I really had the right time of year to pair them up. I just let me see what happens. That way I kind of know if I've got a male or female. Because even if it's probably not breeding season, I think that will show certain signs that you kind of know if you've got a pair or not. So
Yeah.
I got to do a little bit more in to see with the breeding, and I'll probably go out later today, tomorrow as I'm cleaning, stick them together, kind of see what happens, and be nice if I had a pair, at least one pair, and then I can kind of jump up from there. But they're really neat. They're different. But yeah, I'm finding myself looking more towards different snakes, different lizards, keeping variety, keeping the stuff I like, but not so much I need to produce to get this and get that, trying to weed the ball pythons out. It's hard because they've been ingrained in my life for 20 years. And, I've got stuff I produce that is for a certain combination or something I'm trying to produce. So I can't just up and sell them. I need to produce what I set out to, then, sell those off. And then just try to weed it down so that I can have carpet pythons, because inevitably every clutch or every other clutch, I find something I want to hold back, for different traits. So I'm big on selective breeding, especially coastal carpets is kind of what I was known for.
Yeah.
So the little story on that is I had jungles, I had coastals, I had the pop ones. Looked at jungles. I had VPI line jungles at the time. And as they got to about 5-6 years old, they start to get the melanin creeping on the yellow scales.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started to get the smutty look, and natural. It's what they do. But at the time, you started getting a lot of the different bloodlines, shoot line, Gordon shoot, different bloodlines. And so you're starting to get a little bit more yellow because people were more selectively breeding. You get a nice group of jungles, so you can selectively breed for certain traits. I had a pair. So there wasn't a whole lot other than be able to keep a couple babies. I would need to get different bloodlines and add some more stuff to it. So I looked at coastals. The Jaguar gene had been on the market for a little bit, but I looked at those like if we could selectively breed coastals like we've done jungles for the last 20 years, we could start to get, vibrant color, different pattern, some different stuff. And so I sold the jungles off, focused a little bit more on my coastals. I got some red in. And so then you start selectively breeding for, color, pattern, more striping, more banding. And it was really cool when you can do stuff like that. I went to a show in not Galveston. I want to say I was in Houston or something, and met 2 other guys that I had sold some of my carpets to. We all went out for dinner after the show, and we were sitting there talking. And so every breeding, they have certain traits that they were looking for, that they were trying to breed for. And all 3 of ours were different. So you can have better contrast or a more vibrant red color or a brighter background color or just, different traits. And so you can still breed and still keep a coastal carpet, but produce different, outcomes.
Yeah.
And so that's what I kind of started doing with the coastal carpet. So yeah, trying to get maybe more of those, but inevitably I keep 1 or 2 out of every clutch almost. Or maybe a couple more, and then you start raising them, and as they start to color or wherever, you're like, okay, this not quite turning out the way I expected, so then I can sell this out because it didn't quite fit the project I'm looking for. And I think you'll find, with the jungles you're starting to get and start building that, you're going to start doing that too. You're going to like, okay, well, I like this color, I like this pattern, I like the temperament, the Timors.
Yeah.
And you start focusing on them certain things, and then long term, man, Adam was the guy that had these really great tame puppy dog Timors.
That'll be amazing.
Somebody just bred Timors.
Yeah, that would be incredible. God,
Yep.
I love the snakes so much. I can't even tell you. I mean, they're such cool snakes. Once you get them out, they're so chill.
Mm-hmm.
But dang, it's the getting them out part. So
Yeah.
when did the mpin line start?
So the story on the mpin, I got my trio of coastal carpets from a friend that I met at the local herp club. I had a couple snakes and probably had more than a couple. Introduced me to the coastal carpets, and so I started messing with some of that stuff. And he went through a divorce, and he's like, I got to get rid of all these snakes. And so, boom, I became the logical choice, and I got all of them. So not only did I get the coastal carpets and some Antaresia and some different stuff, I got a 16-foot normal Burmese. I got a 13-foot barneck scrub.
Jeez.
That, like I said, I'm not really a big snake guy. I didn't really have experience in big snakes. Scrub was, man, something else. So like I had to start, boom, I got to find a way to move these out. Sold the burn, didn't have it too long where I was able to find a home for it. The scrub I was actually later able to sell. But she was crazy. I had a 4-foot Nia Deshay cage with a slant front, sliding glass, and literally, like you said, your boa did. Like every time coming in the room, she would strike the glass. Like I couldn't go in to to clean water. I like literally had to slide it open, throw a rat in, let her ball up, put her in a tub, clean the cage, fresh water, whatever. Go back in the tub. She's already ate that rat.
Jeez.
I had to throw another rat in. You're back in the cage. That was how she did. So you start training these snakes in a certain way, and that's how they get acclimated. And it was like that. This not the way I want to deal with a snake. I would have loved to have started working with it at a smaller size.
Sure.
But I wound up with saying at 13 foot, and it was too much for me at the time. But the original pair of coastal carpets came from, trio, not pair. Original pair trio came from VPI through him, traced back to Lloyd Lemke. So they're often called, sometimes you'll see Lemke line coastals. Bred one particular pair, and it was through those animals that the mpin line was born from. I take it a great honor to actually have a line.
It's wild, right?
Named after me, even though I didn't go and catch them and have this other stuff. It's somebody else did the work. It just kind of became known as the mpin line. So this was back in the day when, before Facebook and a lot of stuff, there was a lot of snake forums. So everybody went to the snake forums and posed. My tag name was mpin. I started posting up some of the babies, and through normal looking parents, I got these really nice striped animals. Now they're not as striped as a tiger, but they had a nice stripe to them. So I was able to prove that through successful generations, I was producing more and more stripes and better looking stripes. And so through, posting and people buy them, it started getting tagged, mpin coastals. And so we just kind of went with it. And I remember the first time I guess I'd been on Instagram for a little while, and I was showing my wife. I said, somebody actually, I got a tag. I got a hashtag. It says mpin. And it wasn't me that created it. Somebody else that had posted mpin coastals. And so I was like, wow, I'm a hashtag now. Like I've made it, I thought it was kind of cool. But yeah, so it wasn't, really it was attributed to me because I produced them, but not like my animals. Like I went out in the wild, like most people have. Hey, I've got this. I caught these animals, found them. This is my line, and I'm able to go with it. So, like, I'm really honored that I have this line, kind of named after me, and it's great. Now I've got a guy that keeps joking with me that how can you be mpin animal or mpin and not have really any mpin animals? The original pair were older. So I do still have my original first clutch female was 2002. She became the mother to a lot of the mpin line animals. She passed away last year. But I had a 2008 female striped, but not near as striped as her. A little darker in color than the 02 animal. But at the time getting started into it, they color up later, and you don't really know how they're going to color. So I wound up inadvertently selling some of the best looking animals out of those. And you just don't really think about always holding something back. And so I know where they're at. Eric Burt, Morelia Pythons Radio, has some of the best looking trio that I ever produced of mpins. And like, if he produces, like, I'm begging him, like, please, I'll pay the premium, whatever. I'll get some back. But I do still have a 2008 pure mpin female. And then I have a male that was from the original founder, I guess, of the mpin line, and the other female out of that original trio I had. So if we consider mpin line from the two animals, the original pair, he's 50%.
Okay.
So that female, she was an easy 10-foot, gorgeous, kind of nice banded female. She laid one clutch for me ever. And it was, I don't remember if it was 43 slugs or 41 slugs and 2 eggs. But the 2 eggs, there were 2 males. I still have one of those males.
Wow.
So I still have a little bit of mpin blood, but it's not the straight, straight mpin.
Yeah, yeah.
Look, if the Lord's on my side, I should have a clutch out there this year that's, I'm gonna call them 75% mpins.
Nice. And then hopefully Eric will pair up his trio and hook you up.
Yeah. And so that one's, and he's told the story, and I don't know if you've heard it. I had put the snakes up for sale, and there was a guy in Louisiana that had hit me up and said, "Hey, I want these 3 animals." I was like, "Okay." He said, "But I don't get paid till Friday. Can you hold them till Friday for me? And I'll pay you." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And it was probably like an hour or 2 later, Eric Burke hit me up, and he's like, "Hey," and he's like, "I'm interested in these 3 animals." And it was the same 3. I said, "Look," I said, "they're already on hold. This guy's already got them. Now, if he doesn't come through on Friday, then they're yours. But I got to hold to my word. This guy wanted them. Cash is king, but at the same time, your word stands a little bit, of ground. If you got to stick with it." So this guy wanted to buy them, and I told him who it was. So Eric contacted him later, and he said, "If you ever get rid of those animals, ever, I want them. Here's my contact information. You just let me know." And the guy wound up selling them later on. And so Eric has them now. And I didn't know that Eric got them until there was he posted it, I want to say on Facebook. I think there's a carpet python group. And at the top of it, the banner picture is this beautiful coastal. And I looked at it and I messaged him. I said, "You got them animals from that guy, didn't you?" I said, "That's one of mine." He said, "Yep." He said, "I wound up scoring them that trio." So they just have a distinct look. So I would say all the original mpins have I want to say it's kind of a light green hue to their color. And so I can see an animal coastal wise and tell you if it came from my line or not.
Wow.
Nick has a lot of his founder stock was Sylvester line. And all those have a little bit different in the head structure. And I can a lot of times tell his line because of the head structure. Now we've crossed. I sent him an mpin male for breeding, and I think he got like 2 clutches or 2 different years. He bred some stuff. So there's some kind of mpin Sylvester line kind of floating around. So they have a little bit of this green hue and a little bit different structure of the head. And you're like, okay, yeah, that's that line. Now, the more it gets muddied in, not to say muddied, but bred into other coastals, it's going to be harder to tell. But a lot of those that's kind of F1 or F2, I can kind of tell the line they came from.
What happened to that female that was 10 feet long?
She wound up after that one clutch. I think I had her for another year or 2, and then she passed. I don't know how old she was when I got her. Like I said, the guy I got her from, he had it, and he's like, he got divorced, and then I got all of them.
How big around was she at 10 feet? I mean, that just sounds
And she
monstrous.
was Coke can, bigger than a Coke can.
Wow.
Look, probably a little bit bigger than a Coke can. But I mean, gorgeous female. I mean, I think I've got a picture of her somewhere, but this is back when you were having to take pictures with an actual like disposable camera because there wasn't the cell phones and all that stuff. And so I've got a picture, and I think I uploaded it to the computer somewhere. But yeah, got one picture of her ever. Just
Wow.
gorgeous female. She reminded me more of when you look at these guys and pictures from Australia of like a carpet that you would find coastal in that range. Like, boom, you would look at it and say, yeah, I could see finding it out here in the wild, where my other two, probably not so much, or more to a certain locale.
Yeah.
So they were lighter colored. And like I said, they kind of had that greenish hue to them through the baby. So they had just a little bit different look. They were a little bit lighter than she was. And then none of them were striped, but produced striped animals. So, like I said, through the tag name and, form handle, we just kind of got mpin stripes, and they just kind of stuck after that. So
that's awesome.
Work with it.
How big do you like to get your animals? Like is a 10-foot coastal? Is that how big you want your females to be in your collection if you're raising them up, or are you going to try to keep them on a smaller end of that, or how does that look?
Female wise, I would say I would probably go more towards that, but I'm not finding them getting nearly that big. Most of mine are probably 9 feet.
Okay.
I've got into the Brisbane localities in red color, and I was told they're supposed to get massive, like big. And both of my females are smaller than my Central Coast or common coastal. So they're probably a little over 8 feet, big head, typical of the Brisbanes, or with the new book, the Southern Coastals, true Southerns. They got a big head, but they just didn't get the length that I believe they were supposed to have got. But, at breeding size, they're 7, 8 years old. No, probably lower than that. Yeah, I've had them for a while.
Why do you think they're on the smaller side?
I don't know. It could be like I said, I listened to some of your podcasts, and I heard the one Nick talked about. Everybody thinks, well, you want a really big carpet. Well, you will always say, hey, females get bigger than males. Well, like you said, most of the males, they don't go through the stress and stuff that females do through breeding. So, most of your biggest carpets in the wild were males.
Yeah.
So maybe with the breeding and stuff, I'm not going to say it stunted their growth. I just think they put more into reproduction than they do their own growth.
Yeah.
As far as the nutrient wise.
Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. What, how often are you feeding? Like with an animal that size, anywhere from 8 to 10 foot. How often are you feeding at that age? And like what size food item?
So I would typically, I want to say every week and a half to 2 weeks, roughly. And the bigger females will eat jumbos, biggers, and most of them eat large. Going into breeding, or before you kind of start cooling them down, probably try to feed a little bit more frequently and maybe a little bit smaller meal.
Okay.
I think a lot of people like to do a bigger meal and then more frequently. And I did something different on my dwarfs this year, and Lucas was like, no, don't change nothing up. But I did kind of more frequent, but a little bit smaller meal. Instead of, just get all these big, heavy meals. And I don't feel like they're digesting as much to just that next meal in. So whereas a smaller meal, you have, more time to kind of digest, but you're feeding more frequently to build those reserves.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a ton of pressure on you with the dwarf Burms?
Honestly, at first, yeah. Not so much just outside pressure, but inside myself.
Sure.
Because I had them in, I'm a successful snake breeder. And you're like, why can't I get these things to breed? I mean, I think I tried 3 years before I was finally able to successfully breed them. And I might have got it maybe a year earlier, but we had what we call the Snowmageddon in Texas.
Yeah.
And, the power grid went out and it was 0 degrees. Like it snowed all the way to freaking Galveston.
Wow.
Where you would see sand on the beach was snow. So
Wow.
Texas, everything got swamped that year, right? And she was right at that time where she was building, and I thought she might have been gravid, and the electricity was going through brownouts. Like your electricity would be on for like an hour, and it would go off for like 3. And it would come on for an hour, and it would go off for like 3. So those temperature swings caused a lot of issue. And so she wound up slugging out probably 2 weeks after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year, I don't even think I really messed with her because you just have to get this whole system back in line. And you don't want to put more stress on the animal than need be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that room got down to like 55, I think is as cold as it got.
Wow.
But yeah, I spent the night it got down to 0. I literally slept in the snake room with sleeping bag and blanket on a concrete floor with the gas heater. And, a lot of these guys up north were like, well, you could do propane and, like you have to vent some of that exhaust out because propane causes carbon monoxide. So like every 15 minutes I had an alarm set. I would sit up and kind of move the heat where it was blowing to a different direction of the room. And then about every hour, I kind of open the door and let the cool air in and let the air exchange. And I didn't sleep for nothing, but my wife was like, she'd call and check on me. You good? Okay. I'm like, yeah. She understood what I was doing, but at the same time, it was like the house was cold, everything was cold, but I was having to I think I lost 1 snake out of the process. And that was it.
Really?
Yeah. Well, 2, a Madagascar cat-eyed and a carpet python baby, but it was one that was a troubled feeder. And I had literally just probably put assist fed it like a couple days before the storm hit. So you had food in the gut, got too cold, and it didn't do well.
Damn.
So,
and it got down to 55.
Yeah, it got down to 55.
That sucks.
And then I had to alter everything. So then when your electricity goes off and it comes back on, all your heat tape, all your thermostats, everything kicks on. Well, the temps are so low, everything kicks on all at once, and it overloaded the circuits.
Yeah.
So then you had to go out. So you had to alter your temps so that you have a slow rise and maybe a lower temp to meet versus, hey, it's at 60. I need to get it to 80. Everything's full blast. It threw all your switches. Like I thought it had a good that first time, and I went in and came back out later. I'm like, crap, everything's off. I got to look in the breaker trip. So then I had to kind of alter everything so that I could keep it where the breaker didn't trip, but everything would be able to kind of roll like it needed to.
What are you doing like going forward? Did you get like a generator and like have you looked into ways to avoid that?
I have looked into the generator. Haven't acquired one yet. I would like to. Generally, those are like 13 grand. And the way I'm set up, I would probably have to have 2.
Okay.
So we bought a house about 2 years ago, and I don't think it would be right if I had a generator and everything great on the snake building, but I neglected the house, you gotta
get your priorities straight.
Yeah. So I actually have, the snake building has its own electric meter. So I have, 2 different electricity bills. So because it's difference, I would have to have a different setup.
Wow.
Because I don't know, like I have natural gas that comes into line for my hot water heater and my air conditioner. So they could tie the Generac or whatever into the natural gas line, but I don't have nothing for that building. So either they would have to bury another cable that ties in to that meter box.
Yeah.
To run off the one generator. And I don't I don't know if that's something feasible. I mean, it's something I do need to check into, but like I bought solar panels, and so that's a huge initial outlay of cash as well. And so kind of still paying on those, and it's brought the electricity down quite a bit. I'd like to get some for the snake building as well to kind of offset some of that. So just trying to make things work. So eventually I would like to. I'll probably try to get something small generator wise, but I wanted something that would kind of take care of itself. Like you can get generators, but like you have to be home when the electricity goes out.
Yeah, that's what I have.
We haven't had so much like during the winter where the electricity goes out. It would be kind of like yours, but different. So you had the storm come through. We would have the storms in the summer, and it might lock electricity out. And it's 100 degrees or 90 degrees outside during the summer. Your snake room's too hot. Your incubator's on. During the winter, you already got the room a little cooler anyway. Most of the time, you don't have anything in the incubator. So you can probably slide a little easier during the winter than you could during the summer. And a lot of times, storm would go through. I'm at a snake show, and nobody's there to go, hey, let's plug this up, kick it on. Electricity comes back on, go kick it off. I need something that kicks on automatically. So I like that aspect of it, but that initial outlay of cash is like, wow. And
it's not,
you don't have the electricity go off as much that it takes forever for it to pay itself off. Like if you save like say 3 clutches of Dwarf Burmese, it's going to pay for itself. But I only got 1 clutch, right now that, you need to, how are you going to offset that? So, but it is something that I have thought about.
And also maintaining the unit too is I mean, that's a cost as well. Oil changes, running it, keeping the fuel clean, load testing it, all that. That's going to be a cost as well.
And then I heard the battery deal. So they use like car batteries. And then where we're at in Texas, the batteries will corrode a little faster than probably other parts of the country. So I've known somebody that actually had the thing. It's supposed to kick on and whatever, but their battery was dead. So it didn't kick on like it should have. Even though it had been tested, because a lot of them now have those wireless type setups where they do monthly kind of metering, and they run the unit, check everything's good, whatever, but it doesn't know when that battery was dead. It's like it's good now, but then when you really needed it, the battery was dead and it didn't work. So it does, it's upkeep with everything. But yeah, it's just about trying to keep an eye on stuff. But yeah, I ultimately I would like to get one.
Yeah. I work in public utilities, and we have a lot of generators and bypass pumps, and they're the bane of my existence. I mean, with the amount of failures and maintenance and everything, it's crazy. And then even my own little one that I have, I have it just for when the power goes out, being able to get my freezer up and running, because I don't want to lose hundreds of dollars worth of feeder rodents and quail and all that. And I went to put fuel in it this last storm, and the bowl had gotten stuck in the carburetor and it just dumped the gas right out the bottom, so it's there's always something going on.
Yeah, we don't think about maintaining and like once a week checking on that stuff, that just in case. I mean, in case in point, like my vehicle, I don't check the oil once a week. Like we always grew up to check your oil. Well, most of the cars now don't burn oil like they used to. And you regular oil changes and stuff, so you're not out there having to check your tire pressure. Just tire's looking a little low, let me go. Like growing up, it was like every week, man, you got your tire pressure check your oil. You do this, like kind of slacked off. So same thing with that. You just don't think about checking it as often, and then the time you need it, it doesn't work.
Yeah, even when you try to do everything right, and totally empty the gas tank out and use non-ethanol fuel, rec fuel, and all that, and still, you end up with a minor failure. It wasn't that big of a deal, thankfully. I was able to, the carburetor was fine, but just the fact that it was stuck open, it was like, you pour gas in and it starts dumping out, and you're like, well, we're screwed.
Yeah, then you can get it started, but you want to kind of let them fumes dissipate a little bit before you just start firing stuff up.
Oh yeah, for sure. When did you get into the Savu pythons? I know you mentioned those before. Have you had them for quite a while?
Yes. So when I got the guy's collection, I got a male.
Okay.
And sometime after that, I got a hold of a female, and I have bred them one time. Um, Not really sure why they have not bred for me again.
Hmm.
So when I got into them, the only people I really ever saw that had Savu pythons that were successful breeding them were colubrid people. So it was like you kind of keep them cooler, you keep them colder. Um, they had more successful, so I kept them like in the bottom of the racks. Um, and mine always wound up going later in the year for breeding. So they would breed like May, April, May, whatever, June, and then you get babies like September, October, something like that. And then I'm seeing people, Gary Shavino, he's
Mm-hmm.
had them early. Like you're getting them like typical during the summer breedings, and mine have just not done that for me.
Hmm.
Now I've been pairing them up, and I'm hoping this year I get it. But like my male would go off feed in the summer, and that's when I stuck him on female, and it worked. But like right now, he hadn't gone off feed, but I keep
Hmm.
pairing them up, so just hoping that hey, something will happen. But uh, want to get some silvers at some point. Really like those.
Yeah. I had a Savu, and that thing was so wild. It was crazy. I remember I had to wear leather gloves to like get it, get it from the enclosure with a hook, and it
Mm-hmm.
latched onto the glove one time, and I can't remember how long it was on there. But man, any little movement in my hand or arm, and it would just cinch up tighter. And I
Wow.
mean, to the point where I thought it couldn't get any tighter, and it would it was like just crazy, the strength. I ended up giving it back to the person that gave it to me. They were like, "Hey, here's a snake. You should try working with it."
Mm.
Wear gloves, and man, it didn't go well.
See,
That
that's
thing.
weird. Like mine, I can reach in a cage and grab them out, both of them.
That's awesome.
Maybe that's what they are. They're too plastic and they won't breathe. That's probably what it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now the
We should
babies
talk
were
about that.
spastic, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, they're now when it's food time, they come flying out the cage.
Yeah,
But generally, like I can open the cage and see where their head's at, and I can reach in and grab the body and pull them right on out the cage.
yeah,
And so that was one of those. It's like if somebody come over, I would say, yeah, you can grab a ball python, you can grab the savus.
yeah.
Like for a
Wow,
other python other than ball for somebody to grab, I didn't have no problem with them grabbing the savus.
wow.
Antaresia, yes. Carpets, yes. Angolans, kind of hit and miss.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, savus were like when my daughters were younger, it was like, yeah, you can go grab the savu. I never had a problem with them.
That's awesome.
So, I don't know. Now I had a Maclots at one time. He wasn't bad, but he was not tame.
Yeah, yeah. I love Maclots. They're
I'd love to
awesome.
get some more. It was another one of those. I acquired a male, never could find a female, and looked, and everybody that had baby, they were all males. Nobody had any females. I'm like,
That seems to be a
if you
trend
look
with you.
back, yeah, if you look back, you're like, man, I really should have hold that, and just But then it starts a breeding project. So far, you got this adult male that's like
Yeah,
15 years old, and you're getting a baby female. Like if it was a
yeah.
female and you can find a male, you can breed earlier. You could, get the process going. But it's like, let me just sell this male. Somebody may want a pet or whatever, and so that's kind of how I sold it and moved it on. But
Yeah. What all right, I guess we'll wrap it up. Is there any other animals you want to cover?
I
Anything?
think we kind of covered most of them.
What's
Carpets.
something that maybe you don't have right now but would like to get? Like what's on your radar?
There's a few, and I need to kind of get a better cage set up before I get them. But kind of been looking at Loxoscemus bicolor,
Okay.
the New World burrowing python, sunbeam snakes, and Calabar burrowing pythons. I
Oh
used
yeah,
to
those
have
are
a
nuts.
couple a while back, and most of those are all wild caught. And it's one of those things you never know when they're going to close down importation. And so what you're left with is all you've got. And normally they were kind of like, oh, there's this snake, and nobody really, and there might be some people, but very few people really working with them to say, let's start an insurance call and see what we can do to captive breed them.
Yeah.
Financially, not worth it. They have like 3 eggs. So, I mean, you can't make a bunch of money. And so I think that's why some things are lost to the hobby, because it becomes not financially worth it.
Yeah.
You could take a ball python that once, was a throwaway pet. You couldn't give them away when they're a bunch of normals. That's all you could get, wild caughts. Now to all these expensive morphs. But even if you have a small clutch of 4 eggs with an expensive morph, you're paying for the food.
Yeah.
But if you get something that's constantly being fed and you get 3 eggs, and you might be able to sell them for $100, yeah, time and effort, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
That's even if you sell them for $100, it might be a $40, but it just depends on how much somebody has for the love and trying to establish something. How much time and effort are you wanting to put into it? So I think that's kind of where maybe some of my focus is changing to on a certain couple of projects like that, is to focus a little bit on that, even if it's not financially feasible. But to work with something else. And I guess that's my glossy snakes.
Mm.
So I've got 2 pair of glossy snakes. I had a friend of mine, Reed McClure, that lives in West Texas, and he was always posting pictures of field herping, catching all these different snakes. And I was like, get me some glossies. I said, but I want locality. So and it's really weird. If you look at the range maps, they're actually a Kansas glossy snake, but they're Brewster County, Texas localities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you go further inland and east, going into like Austin and Central Texas, that's where you actually come across the Texas glossies. But for these are the Kansas glossies. And I would see them at shows, but everybody had captive wild caught stuff. Nobody had captive bred.
Huh.
So actually got some in, able to acclimate them, successfully produced a clutch last year. And actually they actually started pretty good. Like the first frozen thaw pinky, no, didn't feed. Got a hold of some live pinkies. All of them ate the live pinkies. The next meal ate a frozen thaw. I'm like, wow, these are great. And, I was like, I think I sold them for 100, 125 a piece, something like that. Nothing exorbitant, but enough to say, hey, these are captive bred, and, a little time and effort into it for doing it, because you can get wild caught for like $40, $50, depending on where you went to. So these are captive bred. So if I can start a colony and maybe work with a couple of different, maybe Texas glossy, painted, whatever, and kind of work with those and get some established. It's different. It's something different in the show. It's different just to keep. That maybe you can get something established. And so that's kind of where the drive is gone is, hey, you're successful breeding all these and you've made some money. Well, what about some of the other things that are not commonly kept as much? A little time and effort into them, because all these at one time, somebody put some time and effort in breeding ball pythons.
Yeah.
To, producing, scrub pythons. There's a lot of trouble, effort going into those. And now that you've got couple people that have actually produced the Halmaharas, tannin bars. There's okay. Now we've kind of dialed in how to do them. Now, if they ever close down, importation, you actually can say we may be able to have these for your kids or your grandkids.
Yeah.
Captive produced animals versus, hey, they're never coming out. I mean, just think if Australia shut down before any of that stuff got out.
Oh my God.
Now, granted, there's been some stuff that's come in. We all know. But, legally, if nothing ever got exported out of there, what would the carpet python and Teresi community look like? We would just be in awe of the Australians like they are of us keeping everything else.
Yeah.
We're like, wow, we wish we could have. We've got some. Maybe we don't have everything they have, but we actually have some animals, and
Yeah.
through captive breeding, I would say a pretty decent selection.
Yeah.
From earth tone, colors of the coastal to red coastals to black and yellow jungles to add jaguar gene to reduce the pattern, to actually have an albino Darwin's. I mean, I think we've got a pretty good selection of stuff, even though we don't have on Antaresia, we don't, but we've got some.
Yeah. Yeah. I have the striped spotteds,
Yeah,
and
I heard about that from Ryan Young, right?
yeah, yeah, they're so cool. I love them. I love the stripe, and yeah, it's I like what you're saying, and I like the message of having those passion projects and just trying to stick with those, even though it might not pan out or it might not be the most lucrative thing. But maybe if the people that are really killing it and breeding, if they could
Hmm.
pepper in a couple passion projects, and things that are important to work on and keep alive in the hobby, that would be a good thing for everybody.
Yeah,
Especially, I mean, who knows what we're going to end up with down the road.
yeah. I mean, because as more regulations and different things start kicking in, and you're restricted to, what size animals you can keep, what type of animals you can keep. It might be where you're only able to keep certain colubrids snakes.
Yeah.
And well, everybody's, and they're not, but I'm saying maybe somebody like, I'm tired of corn snakes. I'm tired of it. Well, what about these other different ones that nobody was actually captive producing? Bear's rats. They are being captive produced, but something is rarer than that.
Yeah.
What is the one, the greenish rat snake?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
Yep.
Senecolis. It's out of Arizona stuff. Very, very few captive breedings of those. Gorgeous
Yeah.
snakes. But how many people are really taking the time and effort to get a colony, and start try to produce those?
Yeah. Not many.
No.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll have all your socials and everything in the description. And it was great talking with you. And thanks so much for putting up with the technical difficulties.
Hey, man, Adam, no problem. It is what it is. We love technology, but sometimes it's a pain in the butt, and you can only do what you can do.
Yeah, I want to break my technology today. I mean, these last
Yeah,
couple, I don't know what's going on. I got a brother-in-law in IT, so I'm gonna hit him up and we're gonna figure this out.
sounds good, man. Sounds good. Appreciate you taking the time and put me on. I take it as an honor just to like I said, I've been listening to some of the podcast and really enjoyed what you're doing, and seeing you get shouted out on what was it, carpets and coffee or
Yeah, yeah.
something like that. You're doing something good over there. So just, enjoyed it, man. Enjoyed it.
I appreciate that. The honor is mine, and I'm very flattered by any compliments that come my way, and thank you for that.
Yes, sir.